Chapter 21-28, Did I Allow You to Leave? 3. Seeing that the leader didn't speak for a long time, Tsang took it as a silent agreement. Then, Tsang ordered the waiter, quickly go and get some good wine and food. We have to have a good gathering today. This was really a meeting of fate. We are so fated to meet here and now. It was worth celebrating. Don't you think so? Tsang had asked the last question to the leader of the men in black, and the leader could only nod his head helplessly. The pained expression on his face, as if his father had just died, made many people present feel sympathy for him. However, at this time, everyone present also understood that this Totoro was likely to be the one that was popular in the divine realm a while ago. Otherwise, the leader of the men in black, who had been so aggressive just a moment ago, would not have turned from a master into an obedient grandson in such a short time. From this, it could be seen how powerful this Totoro was. For a moment, everyone's respect for Tsang was like a surging river, but they were more regretful. Why didn't they dare to answer when Tsang asked them the question? This time, people's impression of them would probably not be good. AI. He had lost a great opportunity to get close to this Totoro. Everyone was filled with regret. However, they didn't have time to regret for too long. The waiter had already prepared the food and wine, and had even thoughtfully prepared a few tables. Although the topic they were about to talk about might be very terrifying, the waiter didn't have the courage to stop them. After delivering the food and wine, the waiter left the hall. If no one summoned him, he would never come out. Azure beckoned everyone to sit down. This time, everyone gave him face, and the leader of the men in black was brought to his side by Tsang. On the surface, it was to get close, but in reality, it was to monitor him closely. After that, under Tsang's command, everyone began to eat, but no one took the initiative to start a topic. Seeing this, Tsang could only talk to them about the death of Fog Ice. Tsang Bian eloquently explained the situation of the fog ice, and from time to time, he would point out a person to share his thoughts. However, every time he asked a person, he would bring the leader of the black-clothed men to increase the credibility of the matter. Just like this, after drinking 30 years, the people present who were originally skeptical were all convinced by Tsang that the fog ice had really died. Even at this moment, the black-clothed men felt that their master seemed to have really met with an accident. Some of the men in black who worshipped Wu Yan and had a lot of feelings for her even burst into tears on the spot. For a moment, the scene was quite chaotic. However, Tsang was quite satisfied with the result he created. Turning around, Tsang saw Ning Haolan sitting across from him with a silent smile. "Little fellow, aren't you going to express your opinion?" Kanglan asked directly when he saw that Ning Haolan was the only one who didn't speak. "My opinion doesn't matter," Ning Haolan said indifferently. Then, he picked up Tsang with one hand and the already drunk Qing Xian with the other and went upstairs. In the room, Ning Haolan first threw Qing Xian onto the bed, then held Tsang up in front of his eyes to meet his own. "You actually dare to hug me. You're quite bold." Tsang kicked his little legs and glanced at Ning Haolan as he spoke with a faint smile. "It's all right. Let's get to know each other." Ning Haolan. Ning Haolan reached out and held Tsang's little hand. "The Ning family? You're here for me," Azure said. "It can be considered so. Where are they staying?" Ning Haolan asked. Actually, looking for Tsang was only one of the reasons why they had come to the Imperial City. The other reason was because of Leng Ruoxue and the others. They should be trapped. Hearing Ning Haolan's question, Azure's dark eyes became wet and his voice choked. Ning Haolan could tell from Azure's expression that he wasn't pretending. "What do you mean?" Ning Haolan was confused. Could it be that the Divine Master had found out that they had come to save her and locked them up? In reality, he and Qing Xian had come to the Imperial City this time because they had heard from the Great Elder that they were here to save someone. Hence, they had wanted to see if they could be of any help. However, they had not been able to find Leng Ruoxue and the others after they had arrived at the Imperial City. Hence, they could only set their sights on the Totoro. Furthermore, if someone heard them asking about the Totoro, they would not be suspicious. After all, the Totoro was a hot topic in the divine realm. Many people had come to the imperial city for the Totoro. When Ning Haolan heard Sung's words, he couldn't help but worry. They entered the space created by the rime ice and have yet to come out. I can't contact them either. Azure explained. Then what do we do? Ning Haolan was starting to panic. I don't know. Vast Sea lowered his head and continued, I want to create something to make Wu Yen shift her gaze away from her own space. This way, I might have a chance to help them. Are you trying to lure the tiger out of the mountain? Ning Haolan immediately understood. Yes, but Wu Xiao won't leave the Divine Lord's estate easily, especially when she knows that someone has entered her space. Unless it's something extremely important, she will guard her space with all her might. Azure said somewhat gloomily. It was very clear that Leng Ruoxue and the others were taking a huge risk in saving those people, but it didn't stop them. It wasn't that it didn't want to, but it knew that it would be useless even if it stopped them. If it didn't let Niu save those people, it would become a demon in her heart, which would be detrimental to her future cultivation. Furthermore, if those people were played to death by the fog, it would have a huge impact on Niu. This wasn't something it wanted to see, so it could only compromise. And now, his compromise and his luck had brought about the disappearance of Leng Ruoxue and the others. With regards to this result, it was impossible to say that it didn't regret it. However, if this matter were to start over, it would still agree with Niu's decision. Important matter? How big of a matter is it in the eyes of the Divine Master? Ning Haolan muttered to himself. His words caused Azure's spirit to flash as a slightly crazy idea slowly emerged in its mind. She will definitely leave when it concerns the safety of the Divine Realm. Azure said indifferently. Ah. Such a thing wouldn't happen so easily. Ning Haolan was a little speechless. The safety of the firmament was not something that could be guaranteed just because he said so. If there is a problem with the barrier between the Divine Realm and the 9 Nether prison, she will also leave the God Lord's estate. Azure said. That won't be easy. Who doesn't know that the barrier between the two realms is extremely strong? How could there be a problem? Ning Haolan felt that Sung's suggestion was impossible, because the difficulty was too high. If you don't do it, how do you know that there won't be any problems? Sung Qing shot a glance at Ning Haolan as she spoke with a calm expression. When Ning Haolan heard Sung Qing's words, he could not help but open his mouth in shock. It couldn't be what he was thinking, right? Are you planning to destroy that barrier? Ning Haolan's eyes were wide open as he stared at Azure, afraid that it would answer yes. That was a crazy idea. If the barrier between the two worlds was broken and all the evil ghosts of Netherworld prison rushed into the Divine World, it would be a great disaster for the people of the Divine World. No, I didn't. Sung blinked its dark eyes and lied through its teeth. In fact, at a certain moment just now, it did have that crazy idea. However, it was the spirit of the God protecting tower after all, and it was responsible for the safety of the God world. Therefore, no matter how willful it was, it couldn't do anything that would harm the God world. Therefore, that crazy idea appeared in its heart for a moment before it was cut off by itself. It could not do that. Otherwise, they would be punished by the rules of heaven and earth. However, it could not deny that it was a good idea. Unfortunately, it had its own responsibilities. Therefore, he could only think of another way. Ning Haolan's nervousness also eased a little when he heard Sung's denial. Then, Azure changed the topic and asked about Ning Haolan's plans. As they chatted, Azure decided to bring Ning Haolan and Qing Xian back to the Divine Lord's estate to help him. After waking Qing Xian up, Sung led them out of the inn. In the bracelet, Uncle Long and the others, who had been trapped in the misty spatial world, felt as if they were sitting on pins and needles. It had been a long time, but Shuai and little Brat Yi had not come out. Green Vessel was listless and silent, and the beasts were all listless. The entire space was dead, and such an atmosphere made Uncle Long and the others feel very uncomfortable. Schwer is still not awake. All of a sudden, a cold voice rang out in the ears of Uncle Long, the others, and all the beasts. They looked at the owner of the voice in unison, their faces full of anticipation. When will Schwer wake up? Uncle Long looked at the haggard evildoer and asked carefully. I don't know, but Schwer's injuries are no longer a big problem. The demon said faintly. He had come out to tell them this news in hopes that they would be at ease. After all, these people and beasts were just as worried as he was about Schwer. Schwer's damaged consciousness had almost recovered under the restoration of the origin of chaos. Therefore, he could finally put his heart at ease. Otherwise, he would not have cared about their feelings. That's good. That's good. That. Can we go in and see Schwer? Hearing this, the master of the Ning family was relieved and asked timidly. Yes. The demon nodded his head. To Uncle Long, the beasts, and the rest, his permission was like a great amnesty, and they were overjoyed. Immediately after, the beasts rushed into the purple bamboo house. Uncle Long and the rest quickly followed after them, as if they were afraid that the demon would go back on his word. Chapter 21-29, Creating a Diversion, 1. When they entered the room, they saw Lin Ruoxue, who was covered in a faint halo and lying on the bed with a pale face. Uncle Long, the rest, and the beasts couldn't help but feel their hearts ache. Their eyes became blurry and moist, and they were filled with moisture. Baby and the other little beasts couldn't help but jump onto the bed and lay beside Lin Ruoxue, guarding their master without moving. At this moment, Qing-ju also walked over. Sister. Qing-ju stood by the bed and looked at Lin Ruoxue, who was still unconscious. His heart ached as if it was being twisted by a knife. He really wanted to lie on the bed in his sister's place. However, he knew Lin Ruoxue's condition very well and knew that his sister's injuries had recovered a lot. As for when his sister would wake up, he could not say for sure. If you're done, then leave. Don't be so noisy, Schwer. The demon saw that it was about time and began to drive people away. However, no one seemed to have heard his words as they continued to guard Lin Ruoxue's side without moving. When the demon saw this, he did not throw them out immediately. Instead, he silently acknowledged their existence and sat down by the bed. The atmosphere fell silent again. On the other side, Tsang was also on his way back to the Divine Lord's estate with Ning Haolan and Qing Xian. The leader of the men in black, who had been threatened by Tsang, was leading his men in black and following closely behind them. However, the leader's expression and mood were not very good, and his men were pale with fear, their hearts trembling. Why are you guys so slow? Suddenly, Azure, who was taking small steps, stopped and asked with a dissatisfied expression. That. We were protecting you, so we didn't dare to walk too fast. The leader of the men in black thought quickly and stuttered. Protect me? Just you guys? It's not that I'm looking down on you, but with your strength, if you're really in danger, you'll just be cannon fodder. So, don't talk nonsense and find excuses. Follow me, and whoever falls behind will be punished by the family law. Tsang reprimanded with a stern face. What discipline? Hearing Tsang's words, Qing Xian asked curiously. If he remembered correctly, these men in black seemed to belong to the Divine Lord's estate, right? And this Totoro should be considered an enemy of the Lord God's manor, right? The enemy was punishing the people of the Divine Master's estate. These words were really strange no matter how one heard them. Could it be that this Totoro wanted to kill these men in black? Thinking of this possibility, he looked at the black-clothed man with a gaze filled with deep sympathy. What a pitiful guy. Who asked you to meet a domineering Totoro? At this moment, he still didn't know that Tsang wanted to bring them back to the Divine Lord's estate. Thus, he deeply felt that the relationship between the man in black and Tsang was too chaotic. It could also be said that Tsang was too powerful. The God Lord's estate would rather suffer in silence than do anything to it. Suddenly, he felt a sense of honor. Who asked this Totoro to be in the same country as him? However, although he had considered Tsang as one of his own, Tsang did not consider him as one of his own. Although Tsang had changed its opinion of him, it was not to the point where it would consider him as one of its own. On the other hand, Ning Haolan's fate was much better than his. At least Tsang had acknowledged Ning Haolan's existence. Of course, this had a lot to do with the head of the Ning family. In short, Ning Haolan had borrowed Leng Ruoxu's glory. You want to try? Hearing Qing Xian's words, Tsang raised his eyebrows and then said with a smile. Ah. I don't want to. Seeing this, Qing Xian quickly said. Tsang's terrifying smile made him feel that something bad was about to happen. Then talk less and do more. Tsang said indifferently as he glanced at Qing Xian. Yes. If there's anything you need, please instruct me. Hearing this, Qing Xian immediately perked up and shouted. Be good. Tsang touched Qing Xian's head and was very satisfied with his way of doing things. I'll let this little guy stay by my side as a follower for the time being. Qing Xian, who had been touched on the head, was speechless. Moreover, he wasn't used to a terrifying senior who looked like a pet patting him on the head like a puppy. This feeling was really too strange. Seeing Qing Xian's depression, Ning Haolan couldn't help but snicker to himself. However, he didn't dare to speak up for his friend in front of Tsang, or else he might be the one in trouble. He understood this very well. Thus, remaining silent was the best choice. Then, Tsang's pitch-black eyes swept across Qing Xian, Ning Haolan, and the men in black, causing them to panic and be at a loss. Tsang then smiled at Qing Xian. Little guy, they're walking too slowly. I think you'd better tie them up with a rope and let's drag them along. The black-robed men's faces turned even paler, and their bodies trembled like leaves in the autumn wind. Qing Xian and Ning Haolan, on the other hand, were dumbfounded. Did they hear him wrong? These people were from the Divine Lord's estate. Thinking about this, the two of them actually forgot to react and just looked at Tsang dumbly. Why are you still standing there? Quickly tie them up. Tsang took out a rope and handed it to Qing Xian. Qing Xian came back to his senses and looked at the rope in his hand, then at the ashen-faced man in black. In the end, he walked to the side of the men in black and tied up the leader who was scared out of his wits. Don't tie me up, let me walk on my own. The leader of the men in black who had been tied up begged after coming back to his senses. However, Qing Xian was completely unmoved. This was Tsang's order. As for Azure, he looked up at the sky and didn't even look in their direction. After tying up the leader of the men in black, the rest of the men in black couldn't escape either. After Qing Xian swiftly tied up the men in black, he walked to Tsang's side and said with a flattering smile, Senior, I've already tied them up. Okay, you can drag them away. Tsang said with a faint smile. Then, he gave Qing Xian a look of admiration and patted his shoulder. Little guy, remember, you will have meat to eat if you follow me. Yes, yes. Qing Xian quickly nodded, looking very obedient. In fact, he was very excited. To be able to make friends with the greatest Totoro in the divine realm was something everyone dreamed of. Otherwise, he would not have dared to tie up the people of the Divine Lord's estate even if he was given 10 times the courage. But now, with Tsang's support, not to mention tying up these men in black, even if Tsang asked him to beat them up, he believed that he would do it. Thinking of this, Qing Xian couldn't help but turn around and look at the men in black who looked like aggrieved wives, but didn't dare to say anything. He felt very happy. He didn't expect that the people of the God Lord's estate, who had always swaggered around in the divine realm, would also receive such treatment. It really vented his hatred. Qing Xian was gloating, but he couldn't be blamed. In fact, although not everyone in the Divine Master's estate liked to take advantage of others' power and bully others, most people in the Divine Master's estate were unpopular. However, due to the status of the God Lord's estate in the Divine Realm, many people could only keep their dissatisfaction to themselves and did not dare to speak out. Chapter 2130, Creating a Diversion. 2. Because of this, Qing Xian felt an unusual sense of accomplishment for being able to tie up the people of the Divine Master's estate with his own hands. Moreover, he believed that with Tsang's support, these people would definitely not dare to settle the score later on. It was evident from how well-behaved they were in front of Tsang. However, before dragging the men in black on their way, Qing Xian still said in a low voice, "Don't blame me. I'm just following orders. You guys better cooperate." When Qing Xian said this, he had a helpless expression on his face. Then, he led the men in black and slowly followed behind Tsang. Not long after, Tsang stopped. Seeing this, Qing Xian also stopped and looked at Tsang in confusion. "Senior, why aren't you moving? We've arrived at our destination." Tsang pointed at a tall building. Qing Xian looked up and suddenly realized that they had come to the Divine Master's residence. His heart skipped a beat. This couldn't be another attempt to destroy other people's buildings, right? Not giving Qing Xian a chance to let his thoughts run wild, Tsang took the lead and walked in. Seeing that the guards of the God Lord's estate didn't stop him, Qing Xian also tried to follow him in carefully. After entering, Qing Xian was still a little dumbfounded. He looked at Tsang, then turned to look at the unmoving guard at the entrance of the Divine Master's estate. His heart was filled with big question marks. If he had not noticed that the guard's body was trembling slightly, he would have thought that those guards were fake. However, he didn't dare to say this out loud. Otherwise, he would be despised by Tsang. Tsang led Qing Xian and the others through the Divine Master's residence. Qing Xian was still in a daze when he brought them to his own courtyard. "Little guy, what are you thinking? Why are you in a daze?" Seeing that Qing Xian was a little scared out of his wits, Tsang patted Qing Xian's head and asked speechlessly. "Senior, this is the Divine Master's estate." Qing Xian asked dumbly. Ning Haolan sighed helplessly and put on an "I don't know him" expression. He shifted his gaze elsewhere and began to observe the courtyard. When Tsang heard Qing Xian's silly words, he touched Qing Xian's head and said to himself, "No fever." Why was he talking nonsense? Where else can this be but the Divine Lord's estate? I mean, why are we in the Divine Master's residence? Qing Xian felt wronged. He wasn't talking nonsense. Why did he have to be wronged like this? "I'll stay here, and you'll be my followers for the time being." "Of course, you'll have to stay here as well," Tsang said as if it was a matter of course. He didn't feel that there was anything wrong with them living in the Divine Master's estate. In any case, Wu Xian didn't dare to drive him out. "Senior, did the Divine Master's estate not put you on the blacklist?" After Tsang explained, Qing Xian became even more curious. If he was a god master, he definitely wouldn't welcome the person who had destroyed his home to live here, because Tsang was too dangerous. "She would like to, but she has to be brave enough," Azure said with a smile. If it was possible, Wu Xiao definitely wouldn't want to see him again. Unfortunately, he wouldn't let her have her wish. Senior, you're amazing." Qing Xian couldn't help but wipe the cold sweat off his forehead. His admiration for Tsang was like a surging river, endless. Hee. It's just average." Tsang Qianxiu attacked. "If you're only average, no one would dare to be different." After Qing Xian heard Tsang's words, he couldn't help but think in his heart. However, he only dared to think about it and didn't dare to say it out loud. At this moment, a voice as small as a mosquito rang out, "Senior, we've arrived at the Divine Master's estate. Can you let us go now?" The man who had spoken was the leader of the men in black who had been tied up first. Let me think." Hearing the leader's words, Tsang rubbed his chin and began to think very seriously. Was there a need to think about this? The leader of the men in black wanted to cry but had no tears. This was too much bullying. However, the Totoro in front of him was not one that even the Divine Master was willing to provoke. Therefore, he could only swallow his anger. Otherwise, he would be the one who would be in trouble. After a while, Azure thought it through and smiled faintly. I'll personally send you to the fog. There's no need to trouble Senior, really. We know the way. The leader of the men in black hurriedly said. You bastard. You dare to disobey my words. You're really tired of living. Hearing that he had been rejected, Song was a little angry. Then, he snatched the rope from Qing Xian's hand and said to Qing Xian and Ning Haolan, you guys wait for me here, I'll send them to Rime Ice. After he finished speaking, he didn't give the leader of the men in black a chance to speak and directly dragged the men in black to find Wu Chen. Blue's actions were extremely rough. It looked petite, but it had great strength. The black-clothed people were dragged by it, but they couldn't keep up with its pace. Thus, they were soon dragged by Blue. The leader of the men in black kept on shouting, Senior! Senior! It didn't even make Tsang stop to look back at him. In the end, it was Tsang who was annoyed by him and fiercely warned him to shut up. In the most magnificent hall of the Divine Master's estate, Wu Xian was sitting on the high throne. Beside her stood a man in black, whose face was covered with a black scarf. At this moment, the black-robed man was reporting the situation to Fog Ripple in a low voice. What he reported was exactly what Tsang had done in the Imperial City. When Ripple finished listening, the veins on her forehead suddenly popped up. Then, there was a crisp crack. Her slender jade-like hand that was holding onto the throne's armrest broke it. The black-clothed man's eyes flickered when he saw this, but he didn't say anything. That damned Tsang. Wu Xiao gritted her teeth at Tsang, but she couldn't do anything to that annoying guy. This fact almost drove her crazy. Master, do you want this subordinate to think of a way to get rid of Tsang? After a long while, the man in black suggested. No need. You can't get it away unless it wants to. Wu Xian quickly regained her calm and suppressed her anger. Then are we just going to let it continue to ruin the Lord's reputation like this? The man in black was really unwilling. Whatever. I don't have time to deal with it now. Humph. After I find out who trespassed into my space, I'll slowly settle the score with Tsang. Ripple Mist said viciously. Master, it's been a few days. Could those people be no longer in your space? The man in black asked carefully. In fact, he had wanted to ask this question for a long time, but his lord was not in a good mood, so he did not dare to ask. I'm sure they're still inside. At least, the person I injured can't get away. Wu Yan said confidently. Which one did Master injure? The man in black was very curious. This was the first time he had heard of this. No wonder his lord was so confident. I was a little far away at that time, so I only injured the weakest one among them. As for who that person is, I haven't figured it out yet. However, since he was injured by me, he can forget about living well. Ripple of Mist smiled with a hint of pride. Thinking of this, her terrible mood was somewhat relieved. Chapter 2131, Creating a Diversion, 3, well, maybe that person is already dead. After all, he can't be treated in his lord's space. Otherwise, his lord would definitely find out. The man in black quickly echoed Wu Jing's words, which made Wu Jing even more elated. Well said. Unless he doesn't do any treatment, I'll definitely notice. If he doesn't do any treatment, that person can't possibly survive. After Wu Xian finished speaking, he laughed even more proudly. When the man in black heard this, he thought for a moment before asking, My lord, do you want to capture these people alive or dead? Why do you say that? After hearing the black-clothed man's words, Ripple Mist asked with some interest. If we want to capture those evildoers alive, then we can only wait patiently. But if it doesn't matter whether they live or die, why don't we just kill them directly? The man in black suggested. Kill them? Of course I want to, but we don't even know where they are, how can we kill them? Wu Jing had a slight headache. Originally, she wanted to capture them alive. However, after waiting for so many days, she had long lost her patience. Now, she only wanted to eliminate those people as soon as possible. So, it didn't matter whether they were dead or alive. But not being able to find him was also a big problem. Master, I have an idea, but I don't know if Master is willing to part with it. The man in black probed. Tell me about it. Seeing that the man in black seemed to be full of confidence, Fog's interest was also aroused. Can't Master just destroy the space? Although creating that space consumed a lot of Master's divine power, if we can kill those rascals who trespassed the space, this subordinate thinks it's worth it. The man in black analyzed. Let me think about it. Wu Yan didn't directly reject the black-clothed man's proposal. However, she was also very reluctant to destroy the space she had created with great difficulty. Just as she was deep in thought, suddenly, bang. There was a loud bang. The two doors of the hall were forced off the wall and fell to the ground, breaking into pieces. Then, a snow-white Totoro with its fur standing up appeared at the door. The Totoro's fiery eyes stared at Wu Jing. Its gaze was like a venomous snake, shrouding Wu Jing and the black-clothed man beside her like a shadow. When Ripple Mist saw this, she couldn't help but feel a chill in her heart. The black-robed man beside her was already covered in cold sweat. What's wrong with you? Wu Xian couldn't help but ask angrily. However, Sung ignored her. His body grew to tens of meters tall and his thick, huge tail swept towards the pillar in the middle of the hall. The pillar that would normally require dozens of people to wrap their arms around was crushed into dust like paper. After that, Azure's tail swung towards the roof beam of the hall, causing the faces of Wu Xian and the black-robed man to change. They hurriedly jumped up and the roof beam collapsed. In the blink of an eye, the originally grand hall turned into ruins. Azure stood on the ruins and looked down at Wu Xian and the black-robed man who were floating in the air. Azure's pitch-black starry eyes had already frozen into ice at this moment, and the cold air was almost solid, and it was directly pressing towards the black-clothed man beside Wu Xian. Damn thing, he was the one who gave that damn woman, Wu Yan, the idea to destroy the space that trapped Niu and the others, right? If that space was destroyed, it wouldn't be so easy for Niu and the others to come out. Moreover, what was even more terrifying was that Niu and the others would be taken to some corner by the turbulent flow of space. How could it allow such a thing to happen? Therefore, the man in black was dead for sure. However, since it had just let it know some information about Niu and the others, it could let this black-clothed man die a quick death. After making up its mind, Azure's tail swung out once more towards the man in black. Its tail was extremely fast, reaching the man in black in the blink of an eye. The man in black had long been suppressed by Azure's pressure, unable to move. In the nick of time, a red silk wrapped around the man, bringing him out of Azure's attack range. Song. Are you crazy again? Wu Xiao, who had saved the man in black, stared at Sung and questioned him again. I'm going to kill him. Sung said coldly, yes. It wanted to kill this black-clothed man and take revenge for Niu. Although the main culprit was Wu Chen, he could not kill her. However, killing an accomplice who came up with an idea was not a problem. Furthermore, it was very clear that the person she injured was most likely Niu, but it didn't believe that Niu would die. Other people might not understand Niu's trump card, but how could it not know? However, when it thought that Niu might be injured, it couldn't control the anger in its heart and all of it rushed up. A desire to destroy was like a raging fire, crazily growing in its heart. He is my subordinate. Miro's eyes narrowed as she warned. So what? I want to kill him, are you going to let me? Azure asked domineeringly. I want tea. She said coldly. If she allowed this lunatic to kill her subordinate right under her eyes, how would she be able to convince the masses in the future? Furthermore, the man in black was her trusted aide. She could not just watch him die. Humph. Don't you regret this? Azure narrowed his eyes and a cold glint flashed in them. His large tail swayed up and down, left and right for a few rounds. Following that, a bang. Bang. After a few loud bangs, the newly built buildings of the God Lord's estate collapsed one after another like dominoes. Arg! The house has collapsed again. Everyone! Someone shouted. Then, the people of the Divine Master's estate ran to the courtyard in a panic. When they came out, they saw that the Divine Master's main hall was gone. Everyone was dumbfounded. One should know that the Divine Master's main hall was made of the best and hardest materials. Compared to the previous main hall, the newly built main hall was the best in the Divine World both in terms of appearance and interior. But now, the main hall had collapsed again. Moreover, it had collapsed without their knowledge. This fact made them quite depressed. It was unknown whether they were depressed because they didn't see the hall collapse with their own eyes or because the hall was destroyed by Azure's hands again. In short, their feelings were very complicated. However, for Qing Xian and Ning Haolan, who were experiencing this for the first time, they were more shocked than anything else. Yes. It was absolutely shocking. Due to the God Lord's estate's large area, each courtyard was relatively far apart from each other. In addition, the sound insulation of each courtyard was very good. Therefore, it was difficult to notice what had happened in other people's courtyards. Moreover, the main hall in Rimais was located relatively far away, so it was even more difficult to discover it. However, this time, they had seen the main hall collapse with their own eyes. They knew that Sung had gone to find Wu Xiao, so the two of them had specially split off a trace of their divine sense to follow Sung. However, they couldn't hear the conversation between Wu Xiao and the black-clothed man. They only saw Tsang suddenly fly into a rage and then the hall turned into ruins. After that, it was the other buildings in the Divine Master's residence's turn. They had also left the courtyard in advance because they were on high alert, so they were not injured. However, the other people in the Divine Master's residence were not so lucky. Most of them were more or less injured. Seeing this, the two of them obediently hid behind the crowd and tried to lower their presence to avoid angering the crowd. However, the scene just now was really too soul-stirring. Although they had heard of how terrifying Azure was, they had never seen it with their own eyes. At this moment, Sung's image in their hearts grew even higher. And now, Sung, who was tall and mighty in their hearts, was confronting the God Lord. It was too exciting. At this moment, the two of them became Sung's fans. Their eyes were filled with excitement as they stared at Sung. After Sung destroyed the Divine Lord's estate once again, his anger was slightly appeased. When Ripple saw this, she thought that Sung had vented enough. Although her home was destroyed again, as long as she could protect her most capable subordinate, she was willing to accept it. But could Azure be so easily satisfied? The answer was no. After Tsang destroyed the buildings of the God Lord's estate, he rested for a while, then stared coldly at the black-clothed man. When the man saw this, he couldn't help but shiver. His little heart began to tremble, and he was so depressed that he wanted to cry. He really didn't know how he had provoked this fiend. Why did he have to target him? At this time, Azure smiled sinisterly and then shot towards Ripple Mist. Ripple Mist's heart jumped when she saw this and she hurriedly used her divine power to defend herself. However, before Azure's attack reached her, she changed direction and went straight for the black-clothed man. When Ning Haolan saw this, he couldn't help but cheer for Azure in his heart. What a diversion! In the next second, the man in black, who had no power to fight back and was scared silly, was caught in Azure's hands. Then, Azure's claws gently pulled, and the man in black was torn in two and thrown to the ground in disgust. After that, Azure's claws swiped at the air a few times, and a light gray shadow was caught in his hands. The shadow was trembling, and its face was still filled with fear. It was the soul of the man in black. At the same time, a small flame appeared on Azure's claws. The flame was dark purple and gave off a terrifying heat. Chapter 2132, Escaped. 1. The soul of the man in black in Sang's claws trembled even more when he saw the flames. The color of the shadow became fainter and fainter, as if it would dissipate at any moment. Wu Xiao, who was originally extremely furious, calmed down after seeing the flames. However, her heart was in turmoil and she could not calm down at all. This was because she was no stranger to this flame. It was clearly the Chaos Divine Flame. The last time she saw the Chaos Divine Flame, it should have been on Yes' body. Yes. Yes, Life Flame was the Chaos Divine Flame, but Wu Xiao had never thought that Song would also have the Chaos Divine Flame. Could it be that there was more than one cluster of Chaos Divine Flame born from the heaven and earth? In reality, the flame that appeared in Song's hand was something he had borrowed from Leng Ruoxue. Although Leng Ruoxue's current natal flame was at the level of the Chaos Divine Flame, it was not considered a true Chaos Divine Flame. However, there was still a huge difference. Furthermore, Leng Ruoxue had used this flame to destroy Wu Xian's clone previously. As such, Wu Xian's impression of this Chaos Divine Flame was even deeper. At that time, Wu Wan still didn't know how her clone was destroyed. However, after seeing this flame, she had an idea in her heart. Her clone must have been destroyed by the master of this divine flame. Wu Yan's beautiful eyes narrowed, before shooting a sharp light towards Tsang and coldly asking, "Where did you get this flame?" She didn't believe that Tsang could have the Chaos Divine Flame. This fellow's destructive power was already very strong. If he were to give it such a great killing weapon, would he still want to live? Looking at the dark purple flame dancing in his claws, Azure smiled faintly. "I cultivated it myself." "Bullshit. Do you take me for an idiot? If you can cultivate such a flame, I'll let you kick my head like a ball." In her anger, Wu Xian's tone was a little rough. Her subordinates, who were used to Wu Xian's elegant and noble demeanor, were a little confused after hearing these words. Oh my God! Was this rude woman their high and mighty, cold and noble Lord Divine Master? Could it be that he was replaced? This thought made everyone in the Divine Lord's estate tremble with fear. They wanted to leave this troublesome place and hide far away, but their legs could not move no matter what. When Qing Xian and Ning Haolan heard Wu Jing's words, their admiration for Tsang rose to the peak. However, Tsang didn't really like her words. "You're the one who's bullshitting, right? If this flame was really cultivated by me, you wouldn't have let me kick your head like a ball. You really cherish your life," Azure said. "Humph. That can only mean that I don't believe that you cultivated this flame. Tell me quickly, who is the owner of this flame?" Wu Yan was a little angry from embarrassment. The master of this flame was definitely her enemy. "I've already said that I cultivated it myself. It's up to you to believe me or not." Azure didn't give a damn about fog ice at all. After he finished speaking, he directly raised a small flame and approached the black-clothed man's soul. Then, he slowly started to roast it. "Arg! Ah! My lord, save me!" The black-clothed man wailed in pain. His miserable voice frightened everyone and made them tremble to varying degrees. Wu Xiao was so angry that her face turned red and her towering chest heaved up and down. She knew that Song had done it on purpose for her to see. Although she hated Song for killing her capable subordinate and torturing his soul in front of her, she did not want to make things awkward with Song because of this, at least not now. However, Song would not understand the fog's idea of swallowing its anger. More importantly, the fog could not stop it from doing what it wanted. With the roasting, the black-clothed man's soul quickly became incomplete. His wailing became softer and softer until it could no longer be heard. When the last wisp of smoke disappeared, the black-clothed man had truly disappeared from this world. He did not even have the chance to reincarnate. This kind of person doesn't need to be reincarnated. Otherwise, he will suffer in nether prison. I'm doing this for his own good. After doing all this, Azure muttered to himself. In fact, if it hadn't destroyed the black-clothed man's soul, Ripple Mist would have helped him rebuild his body. However, with it here, how could it give him this opportunity? Normally, as long as one did not commit too many evil deeds, one's soul should be colorless and transparent. However, the soul of this man in black was light gray. This was enough to show that this man in black had done many evil things and violated the rules of heaven and earth. In this case, it could not let that person live. However, looking at the pained expression on Wu Jing's face, that person must be very important to her. When Azure thought of this, he couldn't help but feel proud. He had gotten rid of an evil for the people. But when Ripple heard Sung's words, her expression became even uglier. Her originally beautiful face was somewhat distorted from anger, and her sharp eyes glared at Sung, as if she wanted to burn 2 large holes in his body. On the other hand, Sung had a calm and indifferent appearance. After a long time. After taking a few deep breaths, he suppressed the anger in his heart and gritted his teeth. Are you done now? She still didn't know why Sung had suddenly gone crazy, and this fact made her extremely depressed. Damn it! He had killed her people and destroyed her family, but she could only endure it and could not do anything to this guy. It was a very uncomfortable feeling. Her heart felt like it was being scratched by 100 claws. If it wasn't for Tsung's identity, she definitely wouldn't have so many scruples. Yes. It was all because of Tsung's identity. She found a reasonable excuse for her depression and grievance. Otherwise, she would go crazy. In truth, the people of the God Lord's estate already considered the God Lord Fog Ripple to be abnormal. Of course, none of them dared to say this. Then, they heard Sung's calm voice again. What if I say that I haven't caused enough trouble? Upon hearing this, everyone wanted to die. The more timid ones even closed their eyes and passed out. After Wu Xiao heard Sung's obviously infuriating words, her chest also felt heavy. A breath was stuck in her chest and she almost passed out. What else do you want? Wu Xiao couldn't help but shout. She didn't care about her image or temperament anymore. She only wanted to vent the anger in her heart, but it was obvious that Sung wouldn't let her do as she wished. Hee hee. Don't you know what I want to do? Originally, he had thought that the only way to get Wu Xiao out of the God Lord's mansion was to destroy the barrier of the God World and the 9 Nether prison. But now, it seemed that he could get Wu Xiao out without destroying the barrier. He just didn't know if Wu Xiao would be fooled. Chapter 2133, Escaped. 2. Sung, who had some understanding of rhyme ice, knew that it wasn't easy to provoke it. But who was it? It was Sung. It was the spirit of the God World's God-protecting tower. It might be able to do what others couldn't. Sung encouraged himself in his heart and decided to continue working hard. He had to get this woman out of the God Lord's estate. At this thought, it transmitted a message to Qing Xian and Ning Haolan. After making some arrangements, its dark eyes focused on the mist ripple. The deep love in its eyes was enough to melt the heart of any woman. It was a pity that the woman in front of her was Wu Yan, and the one looking at her was a Totoro that she hated to the bone. Therefore, the exchange of gazes between the man and the beast could not be said to be very affectionate. The two of them looked at each other for a long time before Tsung smiled and said, Sister Wuchen, I find that you're getting uglier and uglier. What's going on? Who's your sister? You're the one who's getting uglier. Azure's words caused the anger in Ripple's heart to rush to her head. Then, everyone present heard their divine master roar without any regard for his image. It was the roar of a lion. The crowd couldn't help but shiver and lower their heads. When Azure heard Wu Xiao's words, he corrected her with a faint smile, Sister Wu Yan, I'm not ugly, I'm cute. However, you definitely won't understand. It's your fault for being unloved. Damn it. What did you just say? When Wu Xiao heard this, she was so angry that she stomped her feet. The fire in her heart burned even more fiercely. However, she still had a trace of rationality in her heart and was not easily provoked by Tsung's words. Seeing this, Tsung was a little disappointed. I said no one loves you. That idiot you would rather die than love you. From this, I can see how much of a failure you are. It said. His words were like a bomb that exploded in Wu Xiao's mind. Tsung's words had also hit Wu Xiao's sore spot. Wu Xiao's face instantly turned green and black, and her chest heaved up and down violently. In the next second, Wu Xiao, who was spewing out flames of anger, quickly flew towards the smiling Tsung. When Azure saw this, he was already prepared. After that, he nimbly dodged the first wave of attacks from Rime Ice. Then, he smiled at Rime Ice. You can't do it. It's too slow. You should die. Wu Xiao's face was black as she stared at Song in anger. Then, she pounced towards Song. Although Azure was in his true form, his body was huge, but he was extremely agile. Facing the powerful attack of the fog, he only dodged and didn't counterattack. But even so, it was enough to torment the fog ripple. Then, Song Ting jumped and ran outside. He floated in the air and waited for Wu Jing to catch up with him with a smile. The furious fog phoenix had clearly lost her mind. Otherwise, if it was the usual her, she wouldn't have argued with Tsang even if she was angry. But this time, she, who had been angered by Tsang, didn't think about it and chased after Tsang. Seeing this, Tsang jumped a few more times and once again opened up the distance between them when fog was about to catch up. Seeing this scene, Wu Xiao's heart became even more resentful, and her desire to fix Tsang became even stronger. Just like that, a man and a beast chased each other and quickly left the scope of the Imperial City. When Wu Xiao realized that she seemed to have left the Imperial City, she had already been trapped in a desolate corner of the Divine Realm. Looking at the barrier that trapped her, the anger in her heart rose by a few levels. Then, she attacked the barrier in front of her again and again. However, the barrier did not move at all, not even a crack was left. Song! Damn it! Quickly let me out! Wu Xiao roared angrily. However, Song, who was outside the barrier, didn't seem to hear her. He crossed his legs and lay on the recliner he had taken out earlier. Niu was the one who gave it this chair. Thinking of Leng Ruoxue, Song was even more determined to succeed this time. Although he knew that he could not trap the Rime Ice for long, this place was not close to the Imperial City. Even if the Rime Ice broke through the barrier and wanted to rush back to the Imperial City, it would take at least a few hours. In addition, it would also create obstacles for the ice fog from time to time. Therefore, it felt that the chances of Niu and the others escaping from the ice fog space this time were very high. However, what it was most worried about right now was Niu's injuries, and it didn't know if they were serious. However, with that idiot Qing Ju around, it should not be a big problem. At the same time, it cast another barrier on the mist ripple. On the other side. After Wu Xian chased Song out of the Divine Lord's estate, the leaderless Divine Lord's estate fell into a short period of chaos. Qing Xian and Ning Haolan took the opportunity to go to the mountain behind the Divine Lord's estate. At this moment, the back mountain was not blocked by the tall building of the Divine Master's estate. In addition, the guards guarding the back mountain had been knocked unconscious by Tsang's pressure and had not woken up yet. Therefore, it was unusually easy for them to enter. However, the two of them were still very careful, afraid that they would alert the other people in the Divine Master's estate. However, as soon as they entered the back mountain, the two of them saw the faint light source that Sang Kozi had described. Qing Xian tried to enter as he approached the light source, but the light source did not accept him at all and even bounced him out. Fortunately, he was prepared. Otherwise, he would have been injured by the light source. However, the rebound made him even more wary of the light source. Then, the two of them looked at each other and attacked the light source at the same time. At this moment, Wu Xiao, who was trapped by Tsang, also felt the strangeness of her special space. Her heart trembled and a bad premonition appeared in her mind. Terrible! Someone is attacking her space. Wu Jing was greatly shocked. She narrowed her beautiful eyes and kept thinking in her heart. Who had the guts to pluck the hair from the tiger's head? They really didn't want to live. Needless to say, the tiger was naturally referring to her. The next second, she suddenly realized that the ones who attacked her space might be those who had barged into her space. This fact made her even angrier. She was just about to catch all of them in one fell swoop. He didn't expect them to appear on their own. Just as Ripple was feeling a little proud, she suddenly remembered that she was trapped. Even if she knew that someone was destroying her space, she couldn't get out. No! She had to leave this place and return to the Divine Master's estate as soon as possible. She couldn't waste any more time on that damned Sung. Thinking of this, her attacks on the barrier became even fiercer, and she kept shouting, "Damned Sung, let me out. Something has happened in the divine realm." Wu Yan deliberately made it sound very serious, hoping that Sung would open the barrier. However, Sung was completely unmoved. And she did not suspect Sung of this matter, nor did she think that this was Sung's trick to lure the tiger away from the mountain, because she prided herself on knowing Sung very well and knew that Sung would not do such a meaningless thing. The divine realm is very good, nothing will happen. Azure pursed his lips and said calmly. Chapter 2134, Escaped, 3, Something really happened. You must believe me. Rhyme was extremely anxious, and her attacks did not decrease in the slightest, but the barrier did not move at all. This result made her extremely depressed. How could she have known that every time she attacked, Sung would cast another barrier on her? Otherwise, the barrier would not be so strong. However, by doing so, Sung's divine power was also consumed very quickly. Of course, the divine power of the fog ice was also consumed at a rapid rate. It could be said that neither side had an advantage in the stalemate. However, Azure wasn't afraid. It had a lot of medicinal pills that Nyo gave it to replenish its Shin power, so it could replenish it at any time. However, Wu Yan was a tragedy. She did not have any mental preparations at all, so she naturally did not have too many medicinal pills in her hands. Moreover, Sung's nonchalant attitude towards her words made her feel extremely conflicted and depressed. In the spirit of the God-protecting tower. How could I not know that something has happened in the divine world? So, don't think about lying to me. Just stay here and play with me. Azure said stubbornly. Wu Yan was speechless from anger. Seeing that Heatsung couldn't get through to her, she could only strengthen her attack. At this moment, Qing Ju, who was trapped in the special space of the ice fog, immediately sensed the spatial fluctuations. His thoughts turned quickly, and he hurriedly called Xiao Budian over. After whispering something to Xiao Budian, he let Xiao Budian out of the bracelet. As soon as the little guy came out of the bracelet, he immediately used the transmigration secret technique. Following a few flashes of light, in the blink of an eye, the little guy had already left the special space. Immediately, he was like a wild horse out of control, excitedly jumping up and down. Calm down, quickly take us out of here. Right, don't forget to call the two people outside. Qing Ju sent a voice transmission to the excited little guy. Yes. Xiao Budian nodded his head, then poked Qing Xian and Ning Haolan with his claws and whispered, "Let's quickly leave this place." However, Xiao Budian was still invisible, so Qing Xian and Ning Haolan only felt someone touch them and seemed to be talking to them, but they didn't see him. Who's talking? Qing Xian was shocked and quickly asked. It's me. Idiot, hurry up and leave this place, that fierce woman is coming back. The little guy reminded. You're Xiao Budian. Ning Haolan probed. Even though he had met Xiao Budian a few times, they were not familiar with each other. However, from the sound of his voice, it was definitely Xiao Budian. It's me. Let's go quickly. Stop dawdling. We've all come out safely. The little guy hurriedly said. Yes. Qing Xian and Ning Haolan nodded, then quickly left the mountain. However, the invisible Xiao Budian did not leave immediately. Instead, he threw a few more orbs into the light source, then left the mountain behind the Divine Master's residence with a bounce in his steps. At this moment, the people in the Divine Master's estate were cleaning up the ruins under the command of the three reverent gods, Xian Yi, Wang Wei, and Xia Yi, who had just returned. Therefore, no one noticed the situation on their side. However, seeing the newly built Divine Master's residence reduced to ruins, the three hierarch felt extremely complicated. They didn't know what to say. This was really. Although they hadn't asked what had happened, they didn't need to think to know that this was definitely the Totoro's doing, because no one else dared to do this. At this moment, Xian Yi stopped a guard and asked, have you seen Senior Azure? It went out with the Divine Master and the two of them started fighting. The guard hurriedly said. His heart was still trembling, and even his voice was trembling. Oh, Xian Yi replied. Then, he patted the guard's shoulder and said, tell everyone to quickly pack up. We must clean up the ruins before the God Lord and Senior Tsang return. Yes. Just as the guard responded, a sudden bang resounded in everyone's ears, and the impact of the explosion directly blew away the few people closest to it. In an instant, the ruins that had just been cleared were destroyed again by the explosion. When he saw this, Xian Yi frowned and could not help sighing in his heart. The Divine Master's estate was really in troubled times. However, Lin Ruoxue and the others should have escaped after Senior Tsang's interference. In reality, it was also Tsang who sent him a voice transmission to bring Huang Wei and Xia Yi back to clean up the mess. The explosion not only stunned the people in the Divine Master's estate, but also Wu Xian, who was trapped in a corner, felt her chest being blocked. A hot stream with a fishy smell gushed out from the depths of her throat. With a poof, she spat out a mouthful of fresh blood, which was still steaming hot, directly onto the barrier. Then, it flowed down the barrier. Seeing this, Wu Yan quickly took a healing pill, her heart filled with even more hatred. She knew that her special space had been destroyed. Damn it! She didn't even have time to take action before she was destroyed by some unknown rascal. In an instant, her heart was filled with hatred, but she did not know who the culprit was. However, if she caught this guy, she would definitely cut him into 8 pieces, and then completely destroy his soul. Originally, if she had destroyed that special space herself, she would not have been injured at all. But now, it was destroyed by someone else. She was not mentally prepared and the space had an inevitable connection with her. Therefore, she was injured quite badly. As a result, her hatred for the person who destroyed her space was even deeper. But now that she was trapped by Tsang, she didn't even have the chance to settle scores with him. This fact made the hatred and anger in her heart reach a peak. Then, she mobilized all the divine power in her body, wanting to launch one last fierce attack. If it didn't work, she could only resign herself to fate and stay here. However, just as she was about to attack, she suddenly felt the barrier in front of her disappear and Tsang appeared in front of her with a smile. Immediately, a feeling of being at a loss made Wu Aisa's chest feel even more stifled. She really wanted to throw all the Shen power she had prepared at Tsang's face, but unfortunately, she could not bear to. At this time, the divine power in her body had almost been exhausted, and she would not be able to recover so quickly. So, the remaining divine power was the guarantee for her to quickly return to the Imperial City. Of course, she was not willing to waste her divine power on Azure. After all, she could not kill that guy, and she could not kill him. Thinking of this, Wu Xiao took the initiative to withdraw her divine power back into her body, but she still didn't say a word and put on a cold and proud appearance, glancing sideways at Tsang. Seeing this, Tsang's smile became even more harmless and he said softly, Sister Wuchen, let's make peace. Don't mess around anymore, alright? Alright. Wu Xian gritted his teeth and said. Who was making a scene? You're the one making a scene, alright? She was so angry in her heart, but this was the result she wanted, so she didn't want to argue with this annoying guy. But in fact, she knew that it was useless to hold on to this matter, Tsang would not care at all. When Azure heard that Fog Eyes had agreed to reconcile, he immediately mimicked his body and happily jumped on top of Fog Eyes' head, then urged, hurry up and take me back to the Imperial City. I'm hungry. In truth, it wanted to return to Nyo as soon as possible because it had already received Ning Howland's voice transmission, and knew that Nyo and the others had already escaped from the Rime Ice's special space. This fact made it abnormally excited and in a great mood, even its attitude towards the Rime Ice had become much more amiable. However, when Fog Eyes heard Tsang's words, she was so angry that she wanted to vomit blood. Damn it, you've done enough, you've caused enough trouble, you don't want to cause any more trouble. You're still hungry? What about her? Who could she find to vent her frustration? What's more, this detestable guy was sitting on her head. How preposterous. Thinking of this, she reached out to grab Tsang, wanting to pull it off her head. However, Tsang's words made her hold back. Because Tsang said, "Don't move. Otherwise, I can't guarantee that I won't accidentally scratch your face when I struggle." This threat made Wu Yan very angry, but she really didn't dare to act rashly. She could only resign to her fate and become Tsang's coachman. A few hours later, the man and the beast returned to the imperial city. At that moment, the ruins of the God Lord's estate had been cleaned up, but the God Lord's estate had been reduced to a flat land. Only the two gates were still standing intact. Standing outside the gates of the God Lord's estate, Azure said to Ripple Mist with an innocent expression, "Little sister Wuchen, it seems like your God Lord's estate has to be rebuilt. AI. There's no place to stay here, so I think I'd better wait until you've finished building the God Lord's estate before visiting." "Humph. Isn't this all you're doing?" Hearing Tsang's words, Ripple Mist angrily said. "Hee hee." Tsang laughed dryly, then he turned to Ripple Mist and said, "Sister Wuchen, I'll be leaving first. I'll come and see you again when your God Lord's estate is completed." With that, Tsang left the Divine Lord's estate with lightning speed. Seeing Tsang's back getting further and further away, Wu Xiao couldn't help but shout, "Don't ever come back. You're not welcome in the Divine Master's estate." The only reply she got was the shocked gazes of the crowd and a slight breeze. However, when the onlookers felt Wu Ling's cold eyes shooting daggers at them, they immediately scattered like birds. When Ripple Mist saw this, she let out a long sigh of relief. Then, she stepped into the God Lord's residence that had been razed to the ground. At this moment, Tsang was like a bird that had escaped from its cage, happily flying towards Leng Ruoxu's direction. "Nyo. I'm coming." Chapter 2135, Tsang, who protects her. 1. Azure teleported like a bolt of lightning and arrived at the Ning family's courtyard in Imperial City. Although Ning Haolan had given it this address, it was still very familiar with Imperial City, so it found it without much effort. After entering uninvited, Azure scanned with his divine sense and found Uncle Long and the others. Then, he teleported again and appeared in front of them in the next second. "Little whale, you've finally come out. I was so worried," Tsang said hurriedly when he saw Uncle Long. His dark eyes quickly swept over Uncle Long and the others before saying, "Where's Anayu?" At this time, Uncle Long and the others were sitting in the garden of the Ning family's courtyard with sad faces. When they saw Tsang Ho, they looked at each other and didn't know how to speak. With Tsang's nervousness towards Shuai, if he knew that Shuai was injured, who knew what he would do? With a demonic man who could explode at any time, they were already under a lot of pressure. If the destructive Tsang was added, the immortal realm would not have any good days. Uncle Long and the others were secretly thinking about how to tell Tsang about this matter to avoid the least harm. At this moment, they did not know that Tsang had already known that someone was injured. However, Tsang was too confident in Leng Ruoxue. Hence, even though he knew that Leng Ruoxue might be injured, he was not too worried. After all, there was still that idiot Qing Ju and that demonic man who could not be exposed. They wouldn't let Niu be too heavily injured, right? However, seeing that everyone was only looking at it and no one was answering its question, it was a little angry. "Where's Anayu? I'm asking you guys a question. Could Niu be in the room?" Thinking up to this point, it continued to scan the area with its divine sense. It wasn't there. There was no one. "Where's Anayu?" Tsang asked through gritted teeth, the fur on his body quickly standing up, as if it could explode at any moment. Seeing this, Uncle Long sighed and said, "Shuai is injured, that brat Yi is healing her." In reality, Leng Ruoxue and the demon were still in the bracelet. Green Vessel had moved them out to let them pacify Tsang. However, when they saw Tsang, they realized that they were not confident that they could pacify this fellow. After hearing Uncle Long's words, Azure narrowed his eyes and said coldly, "Are your injuries very serious?" "It must be very serious, or else Niu wouldn't be hiding in the bracelet and not come out." Azure's heart was clear, but it still couldn't help but want to ask. It wanted to hear Uncle Long and the others tell it that Nyo's injury was not serious. Thinking of this, Azure's originally strong heart suddenly started to beat wildly. The way it looked at Uncle Long and the others also caused them to subconsciously lower their heads, not daring to look at it. Seeing this, Tsang flew into a rage and said fiercely, "I'm asking you. Why is no one answering me? He's fine now. He just hasn't woken up yet." Uncle Long saw that Tsang was about to get angry and quickly said. Then, he gave a look to the master of the Ning family, indicating that he should say a few words. Seeing that he couldn't avoid it, the master of the Ning family could only force himself to say, "Yup. He's fine now, and I believe he'll wake up soon." When he said these words, cold sweat trickled down his back because the pressure that Tsang gave him was too great. Tsang only casually glared at him and his heart was already trembling. However, after hearing their words, Tsang was not completely at ease and continued to ask, "Since you're fine, why are you hesitating? Can't you just say it?" Tsang was quite dissatisfied with them because it hated to see men like this. Therefore, at this moment, its impression of Uncle Long and the master of the Ning family dropped a lot, and its attitude towards them was not so good. Fortunately, Uncle Long and the master of the Ning family didn't know that Tsang's attitude towards them had changed. Otherwise, they would have cried out that they were wronged. In fact, they were so careful because they were afraid that Tsang would take the opportunity to make trouble. Unfortunately, Azure didn't understand their efforts. But now, after hearing Tsang's words, they felt a little wronged. Uncle Long blinked his eyes and said in a low voice, "We're just afraid that you won't be calm, so we're thinking about how to tell you. Don't worry, I'm very calm. At most, it'll just destroy the Divine Master's residence." Tsang glanced at Uncle Long disapprovingly, then said in a calm and casual tone, as if he was saying the weather is good today. However, Qing Xian's eyes widened when he heard Tsang's words. He was speechless. Didn't you just destroy the Divine Master's estate? Even if they wanted to destroy it, they would have to wait until they finished building the Divine Master's estate, right? Otherwise, it wouldn't be destroyed now. That's reasonable. I also promised Wu Han that I would visit her after her God Lord's estate was built. Hearing Qing Xian's words, Tsang nodded in agreement. Ah. Why would God Lord Fog Ripple invite you to be a guest? Qing Xian's eyes widened in disbelief. Why did these words sound so mysterious? Who would still want the same person to visit their house after it was destroyed twice? How cheap must this master be to be able to do such a thing? He couldn't convince himself to believe Tsang's words, but he didn't dare to not give Tsang face. However, the curiosity in his heart was like a cat scratching his heart. Of course she will, she can't wait for me to come. I'm an honored guest of her Divine Master's estate. Normally, she wouldn't even be able to invite me. If I'm willing to go, she should be offering high incense. Tsang said confidently. However, his words made Qing Xian blush with shame. He could tell that the person in front of him was the most shameless. Uncle Long and the others were confused by the conversation between Qing Xian and Tsang. After they had escaped from the special space of Rime Ice, they had been brought out of the Divine Lord's estate by Green Vessel. Therefore, they had no idea what had happened in the Divine Lord's estate. Seeing their bewildered expressions, Ning Haolan kindly told them that Sang Yu had destroyed the Divine Lord's estate and lured Wu Qin out of it. That was how they had managed to escape from danger. When Uncle Long and the others heard this, they sighed and had mixed feelings in their hearts. At this time, they didn't know whether they should hate Wu Yu or pity her. However, they looked at Tsang with more respect. Although Tsang said that he would not care about them, it was all thanks to Tsang's help that they were able to survive the 2 times they had come to the Divine Lord's estate. If it wasn't for Tsang, they might have become Fog Ice's prisoners by now. Thinking of this, Uncle Long looked at Azure gratefully on behalf of the crowd. Senior Tsang, I've troubled you. I'm doing this for Nyo. Sangjin told the truth, then changed the topic. Now, tell me the truth about Nyo's situation. Don't hide anything. It had not forgotten about this. Uncle Long nodded and told Sung everything that had happened after they had entered the special space in Rime Ice. Sung pondered after hearing this. Chapter 2136, Sung's Protectiveness, 2. Since Nyo was injured to save those people couldn't be saved for nothing. Sung thought to himself, and asked without changing his expression, since those people have been rescued, where are they now? He's been locked up by Ching Ju, Uncle Long told the truth. In the name of letting them recuperate well, Green Vessel had imprisoned them somewhere in the bracelet. Until now, he had not had the chance to speak to those people. Oh. Azure responded softly and didn't say anything else. When everyone saw that he didn't say anything, they didn't dare to say anything either. Uncle Dragon stared at Azure, as if waiting for his next move. However, to his disappointment, Azure asked Ning Haolan to arrange a room for him, then went into the room and didn't come out. However, in reality, Sung had contacted Green Vessel in private and asked Green Vessel to hand those people over to him. He also asked about Leng Ruox's situation. After knowing that the origin of chaos was treating Leng Ruox's injuries, he finally felt at ease. After Green Vessel heard Sung's request, he did not make things difficult for it. He gave the two of them to it, along with Bing Yao and Qing Yang. In any case, he didn't have time to deal with those people now, so he would let Sung deal with them. Qing Ju had a good idea. Azure brought those who didn't know anything back to the god-protecting pagoda. Soon after, he discovered that there was actually an extra tail by his side. "What are you doing here?" Sung said unhappily as he stared at the white-robed man who had suddenly appeared behind him. He must have brought this guy here by accident. "I'm here to visit, okay?" The white-robed man had a smile on his face as he spoke indifferently. "If I say no, will you leave?" Sung Qing glanced at the white-robed man, dream dust way. "I won tea," Huan Chen said in a carefree manner. "Then why are you wasting your breath on me?" The consequences of Azure's unhappiness were severe. However, Huan Chen's skin was extremely thick. He didn't care about Azure's tone at all. Instead, he said with a slight grievance, "You were the one who asked me first." "So what?" "I didn't expect you to answer me, but don't follow me. Go do what you need to do, I'm busy," Sung said as if he was chasing away a fly. "Don't be like this. We've known each other for so many years." Huan Chen chuckled. He had already made up his mind to tangle with Azure to the end. However, Sung frowned deeply when he heard Huan Chen's words. He said impatiently, "So what? Don't pester me, get away from me, I'm annoyed." At this moment, Azure absolutely loathed phantom dust. Of course, this had a lot to do with the fact that he used to be that idiot's weapon spirit. What he was doing now was called taking his anger out on him. Because Nyo was injured because she saved stupid Yes subordinate, it really didn't have any good feelings for Huan Chen. If he wanted to blame someone, he could only blame his bad luck. However, Huan Chen wasn't easy to dismiss. After hearing Sung's honest words, he only smiled faintly. Then, he used his slender fingers to flick his sleeves as if he was dusting them. Then, he said, "Sung, after so many years, not only did you not restrain your temper, but it has become worse and worse. However, this has nothing to do with me. I just want to know, how do you plan to deal with those people? Does this have anything to do with you?" Azure said indifferently. He did not mind Huan Chen calling him a bad-tempered person. After all, that was the truth. However, he could not ignore Huan Chen's motive. They're old master's subordinates, so they're also useful to little master. I hope you don't kill them all, otherwise, won't little master's efforts be in vain? Huan Chen tried to persuade her, but he didn't know how much Azure would listen to him. He knew very well that this fellow was even more willful than the mistress of the dark world at times. "Don't worry, I won't kill them yet. I just want to have a heart-to-heart talk with them. As for whether they have the chance to stay by Nyo's side, it will depend on their performance." Azure said indifferently. "That's good." Hearing Sung's words, Huan Chen was relieved. However, he wasn't confident in his heart. he didn't know if those people could be used by Leng Ruoxue. After all, they were once all-powerful characters. It wouldn't be easy to make them submit to a little girl. However, he was very confident in Leng Ruoxue. He knew that Leng Ruoxue was not an ordinary person. It was a pity that not everyone had such good judgment. However, this was not without its benefits. After getting the answer he wanted to know, Huan Chen stopped pestering Yu Tsang and disappeared. Seeing Huan Chen leave, Azure finally revealed a smile. This annoying fellow still has some self-awareness. Then, Tsang Xiaoxiao's figure disappeared. When it reappeared, it was in Bing Yao and Qing Yang's room. Senior Tsang. Seeing Tsang's sudden appearance, Bing Yao quickly stood up to welcome him. Qing Yang also stood up. During this period of time, Bing Yao had been telling him about Leng Ruoxue's little junior sister, so he more or less understood the people around Leng Ruoxue. And after hearing about some of Leng Ruoxue's glorious deeds, as well as her unparalleled affinity, he was a little envious of this little junior sister's opportunities. Of course, he was only envious and not jealous at all. More importantly, little junior sister was not only the disciple that Master had acknowledged, she was also his savior. As such, he was naturally grateful to Leng Ruoxue. Furthermore, he had wanted to take good care of Leng Ruoxue's situation. Who knew that he would be locked up by Green Vessel, who had taken his anger out on her? Thinking of this, Qing Yang couldn't help but say, Senior Tsang, I wonder how little junior sister's situation is. Can you tell me? I don't know, Tsang rolled his eyes at Qing Yang and said in an unpleasant tone. Ah. Hearing Tsang's words, Qing Yang was suddenly at a loss. Senior Tsang, we have been locked up by Green Vessel and have no idea about junior sister's situation. The two of us are also very worried about Shuai'er's condition, so we hope that Senior Tsang can tell us the truth. When Bing Yao heard Tsang's words, he thought that Tsang didn't want to tell them. Thus, he spoke with great sincerity and lowered his stance. However, Azure really didn't know. He only heard that Leng Ruoxue was fine, but how could he know the exact details when he couldn't enter the broken bracelet? Hence, when he heard Bing Yao's words, Tsang was furious. You bastard! I already said I don't know, and you guys didn't believe me. Do you think I'm not worried about Nyo's condition? But that broken bangle won't let me in. What can I do? Azure roared in rage. Its roar completely stunned Bing Yao and Qing Yang. They were stunned for a while, then Bing Yao said, I'm sorry, Senior Tsang, I thought you would know. After Bing Yao finished, he couldn't help but wipe the cold sweat on his forehead. Woo! Did he offend Tsang? He was a little scared, and his little heart couldn't help but beat wildly. Chapter 2137, Tsang's Protectiveness, 3, I don't know shit. It would be great if I knew. Tsang roared, its fur standing on end. When Bing Yao and Qing Yang saw it like this, they were so scared that they didn't dare to speak. However, he didn't do anything to them, since these two guys were Nyo's senior brothers. Then, Tsang's embarrassed and angry figure flashed and disappeared from Bing Yao and Qing Yang's room. Seeing that Tsang had left, the two of them couldn't help but wipe the cold sweat off their foreheads. Only then did they realize that their backs were completely drenched. They looked at each other and sighed. After Tsang left the room, he had nowhere to vent his anger. In a fit of anger, he left the tower and destroyed a mountain in the outskirts of Yu City. The tall mountain was cut in half by Tsang, and then he threw it away, sending it flying into the sky like a meteor. After doing all this, Azure felt much better. Then, he silently returned to the God Guardian Tower. This time, it did not go to Bing Yao and Qing Yang. Instead, it appeared in front of some people who had almost recovered from their injuries. Those people had been imprisoned in a courtyard by Qing Ju when they were in the bracelet. Moreover, Qing Ju had set up a barrier outside the courtyard. Therefore, those people could not come out even if they wanted to. They were handed over to Queen Tsang, who did the same and locked them at the top floor of the God-protecting tower. However, Tsang didn't torture them. Tsang had already built a few small courtyards on the top floor of the God-protecting pagoda. Although these courtyards were small, they were complete and all connected. When they were moved here, they did not know that the original owner of the courtyard had changed. They thought that green vessel had moved them to a new place. Hence, when they saw Tsang, they were only slightly stunned. After that, they did not pay much attention to his existence. Seeing that these people seemed to be living a good life, Tsang's dark, diamond-like eyes swept over the people present before he smiled and said, "Are you used to living here? It's all right. I wonder when we will be able to meet young masters Qing Yang and Bing Yao." At this time, a middle-aged man asked. He could see that the Totoro in front of him should be the owneress. The middle-aged man who had spoken had regular features, but he still looked a little haggard. His body was also slightly thin, but he was still in good spirits. His dark eyes were bright and he exuded the aura of a superior. Why? Hearing the middle-aged man's words, Tsang was somewhat unhappy. These ungrateful things, it was clearly Nyo's credit that saved them, but they didn't even ask about Nyo's condition, their eyes only staring at those two pieces of trash. This fact made it a little angry. However, it didn't show its anger and instead asked casually. When the middle-aged man heard Tsang's question, he thought that Tsang didn't want to pass on the message. His face immediately fell and he said unhappily, "We want to see the young master. Naturally, we have something important to tell them. Quickly help us pass on the message. Don't ask what you shouldn't ask." It could be seen that he treated Tsang as an errand boy. All right. Azure was so angry that he laughed. He didn't know if it was because he looked too easy to talk to, or if these people had become stupid after being locked up. In the entire divine realm, there weren't many people who dared to order him around like this. This was a novel experience for it. Then, with a change of thought, Bing Yao and Qing Yang were moved to the yard. When they saw Tsang, Bing Yao and Qing Yang wanted to say something, but Tsang glared at them and stopped them. Then, Tsang sent them a message, "Don't expose my identity." When the two heard this, they immediately felt the same way and didn't dare to say anything else. At this moment, the middle-aged man who had ordered Tsang saw Bing Yao and Qing Yang and sobbed with tears. "Young masters, I didn't think that we would see the light of day again. The heavens have eyes. We must take revenge for the divine master." The middle-aged man was so excited that he almost knelt down to show his loyalty. Bing Yao and Qing Yang saw this and comforted him in unison, "Uncle Lien, don't worry. We will definitely avenge master." "That's good. That's good. We've been struggling on whilst at death's door all this time, waiting for this day. A divine master. You'll have your revenge soon." The middle-aged man called Uncle Lien looked up to the sky and cried with tears streaming down his face. Humph. At this time, an untimely cold snort broke Uncle Lien's fighting spirit. When Uncle Lien heard this sound, he wiped the tears from his face and glared at Tsang with an unhappy expression. "What are you snorting at?" The humph just now was from Blue, and it was definitely a sign that it wasn't happy. Now that the middle-aged man asked about it, Blue could only kindly explain, "I'm snorting because you're being smug too early. Things haven't even started. What are you so proud of?" Tsang looked down on this kind of person the most, his words were better than his singing. "If you really want revenge, go now." And a big enmity was about to be avenged. I haven't reported it yet, right? There's still time to give your thoughts after reporting. What's there to be smug about now? On this point, Nyo's performance was much better than theirs. If she thought about it, she would do it. If she couldn't do it, she would keep a low profile. In short, before she succeeded, she definitely wouldn't show off. Thinking of this, Tsang's gaze towards the middle-aged man became even more disdainful. The middle-aged man had never dreamed that he would one day be looked down upon by a little beast. Immediately, the anger in his heart surged, and then he pointed angrily at Tsang and said, "When did I say I was proud? Can't I just sigh?" Moreover, with the two young masters here, the divine master's revenge will be taken sooner or later. It's only a matter of time. "Oh, really? If I'm not mistaken, the divine master you spoke of has been dead for hundreds of thousands of years, right? Weren't the two of them here for such a long time? Have you avenged your divine master? Azure said mockingly. It couldn't bear to see someone else give the credit that should have belonged to Nyo to another person, even if this person was Nyo's senior brother. Moreover, looking at the appearance of these people, it seemed that they had never thought of Nyo's existence in their hearts. It would not allow this. That's because the situation is a bit special. The two young masters are still young, so naturally, they are not the opponent of that old woman, Wu Cheng. But now it's different. With us helping the two young masters will definitely be able to avenge the divine master. The middle-aged man stuttered. Just you? Hee hee. I really didn't know that trash like you had this kind of ability. If you're really that capable, how could you have let Wu Mo succeed and be imprisoned by her for so many years? Have you recovered your strength? Sang Qing glanced at the people present, and the darkness on her face grew deeper. Her words also made the people present somewhat angry from embarrassment. A little beast like you can't decide whether I'm trash or not. A cold-looking man said indifferently. Then, he continued, our strength will soon be restored to its peak. As long as we have some time, what happened that year can't be explained clearly in a few words. Although we have become the prisoners of fog ice, we can't be blamed by anyone. In other words, Tsang didn't have the right to blame them. However, Tsang just smiled indifferently when he heard the man's words. Bing Yao and Qing Yang, who had been listening, didn't feel so good. They were very anxious, afraid that Uncle Lien and the others would anger Tsang. If they didn't agree and started fighting, the two didn't dare to imagine the consequences. However, Tsang Ju wouldn't suffer a loss. Thinking of this, Bing Yao said first, Uncle Lien, you are all loyal to our master. I know that you are eager to avenge our master, and we are the same. However, we have to think about it carefully. Besides, we are not strong enough. We can only help from the side. What's wrong? You're not willing to take the lead. You're the divine master's disciples. If you don't lead the way, the others won't be able to convince the public. Hearing Bing Yao's words, Uncle Lien immediately became anxious. He had high hopes for Bing Yao and Qing Yang, and he felt that no one was more suitable than them. Therefore, Bing Yao's words had disappointed him. I still have a junior sister, she can, Bing Yao said straightforwardly. But before he could finish, he was interrupted by the anxious Uncle Lien. What great things can a woman do? Uncle Lien said somewhat angrily. Then, he suddenly reacted and said in a daze, what did you just say? Junior sister. When did the divine master accept a female disciple? Not only was Uncle Lien surprised, the people present were more or less surprised. When Tsang saw their expressions, the anger in his heart grew. They were indeed ungrateful wolves. They didn't even know who had saved them. Feeling Tsang's anger, Bing Yao quickly explained and emphasized that it was all thanks to his junior sister that they were saved. After hearing Bing Yao's explanation, Uncle Lien and the others were silent for a long time. Actually, they could not be blamed for not knowing who their savior was. Many of them were unconscious at the time, and even if some of them were still conscious, they could not remember the situation clearly. Furthermore, Leng Ruoxue had never appeared in their memories before. Hence, they naturally gave the credit of being saved to Bing Yao. However, with Tsang here, how could it allow such a thing to happen? Chapter 2138, Intimidate, 1. Although Azure was very angry, at this moment, it was surprisingly calm. It wanted to see how these people would react after they found out that Nyo had saved them. If their performance was not to his satisfaction, then they would be in deep trouble. Although Azure's gaze wasn't on them and was instead looking up at the sky at a 45-degree angle, his divine sense was still following the people present. Bing Yao looked at the silent crowd and broke out in a cold sweat. In fact, he was very clear about these people's thoughts, but he would not agree with them. Therefore, he was also waiting for these people to make the right choice. He hoped that they would not let him down. He prayed in his heart beating like a nervous deer. Time seemed to have frozen at this moment. No one spoke, and the air pressure had dropped to the freezing point. After a long time, the middle-aged man that Bing Yao addressed as Uncle Lien looked at the crowd and finally spoke slowly. "Young masters, it's a big deal to avenge the Divine Master. I'm afraid that your junior sister can't convince the public, right?" Uncle Lien said hesitantly. Then, he secretly glared at the others. This was the result of their joint discussion. But these people wanted him to be the spokesperson. But he had to say that he was the closest person to Master Yu. But after he finished, he carefully glanced at Bing Yao and Qin Yang. He was relieved when he didn't see any displeasure on their faces. After all, he valued these two young masters very much, and he didn't want them to be hostile to him because of this. However, he had overlooked Sang's existence. In fact, Bing Yao and Qin Yang had some reactions. They just didn't show it on their faces, but they were unhappy with Uncle Lien's words. They knew that it wasn't Uncle Lien's idea alone. Judging from the expressions of the people present, it wasn't easy to get them to acknowledge their junior sister. For a moment, the two of them were in a dilemma. In front of them, there were these arrogant old things and Sang who was eyeing them like a tiger watching its prey. The two of them frowned and thought for a while before Bing Yao spoke again. "Uncle Lien, junior sister is the successor chosen by Master. No one is more suitable than her to lead us to avenge Master." Bing Yao had said this in hopes that they would understand the status of their junior sister, but who knew that as soon as he finished speaking, it immediately caused someone's dissatisfaction. "Why would Master Yu choose a woman as his successor? I don't believe it." The one who spoke was a woman. Her face was covered with terrifying scars. Her beautiful eyes had become rather dull after being locked up for so long, but as she spoke, they shone with a strange light. Her eyes clearly showed disbelief and disapproval. "This is Master's decision. You have no choice but to believe it." He didn't have the same respect for Uncle Lien when he spoke to this woman. Besides, he didn't have a good impression of this woman. Back then, she had the fiercest relationship with Wu Yan, and this woman was the one who had been tortured by Wu Yan and vented her anger. "Young Master Bing Yao, are you using Master Yu to pressure me?" The woman asked with dissatisfaction after hearing what Bing Yao said. However, before Bing Yao could reply, the lady was stopped by a cold voice. "Yaoji, pay attention to your status." The one who spoke this time was a rather young man. He was also very handsome, but there was a long scar from the corner of his left eye that ran through his entire face, destroying his overall handsomeness. He had originally been sitting in an unremarkable corner behind the crowd, but as he spoke, he walked out from behind the crowd. Everyone present made way for him without prior agreement. From this, it could be seen that his status was extraordinary among these people. Even Uncle Lien gave up his seat to the young man when he saw him. The young man stopped in front of Bing Yao and looked straight at him. "Young Master Bing Yao, you should know who we are. May I know what abilities your junior sister has that we acknowledge? If not, even if she is the heir chosen by Master Yu, we will not acknowledge her." The young man said indifferently. "My girl doesn't need your acknowledgement." Sang didn't give Bing Yao a chance to speak and said coldly. "Who are you? What's the relationship between you and young Master Bing Yao's junior sister?" Hearing Sang's words, the young man calmly replied. "You don't need to know who I am. However, I can tell you that Nyo is the future master I acknowledge. As long as I acknowledge her, it's fine. As for you trash, you're not even worthy of carrying her shoes." Azure Chi said. "Damn it. What did you just say?" Yaoji was enraged, but Sang didn't even spare her a glance. Instead, he replied indifferently, "I said you guys aren't even fit to carry Nyo's shoes." "What, don't you understand what I'm saying? Could it be that I've been locked up for too long, so my hearing has deteriorated?" Sang's words were full of provocation, making Bing Yao and Qin Yang break out in cold sweat. Was this the rhythm of a fight? The two of them were a little scared, but they knew that even if all these people were added together, they wouldn't be able to defeat Sang. But to their surprise, the young man didn't get angry when he heard Wan Sung's words. He even showed a faint smile. However, the winding and ugly scar on his face made his smile look a bit desolate. Then, he heard the young man say, although you're very confident in your future master, that's also your business. As for whether we're worthy of carrying her shoes or not, it's not something that can be decided by your one-sided words. Little guy, what you said seems to make sense. Let's wait and see. Azure suggested after hearing the young man's words. You called me little fellow. The young man's face didn't change when he heard Sung's provocation, but when he heard these two words, his face changed. He automatically ignored Sung's words and only had these two words in his eyes. When the others present heard this, they couldn't help but open their mouths. Bing Yao wanted to laugh when he saw this, but he didn't dare to reveal Chu Sung's identity. Otherwise, he would be the one in trouble. As for Qin Yang, he was also having a hard time holding back his laughter. However, he did not dare to say anything. What's wrong? Do you have an opinion? Sung Qin glanced at the young man and said disapprovingly. What if there is? The young man couldn't help but ask. His heart was already in turmoil because he realized that he couldn't see the strength of the little beast in front of him. This was too unbelievable. Could it be that this little beast was stronger than him? However, that was impossible, right? Although he had been imprisoned for a long time and his strength had declined slightly, he originally had the strength of a reverent god and few opponents in the divine world were his match. Therefore, this fact surprised him. Chapter 2139, Intimidate, 2, It's useless. In my eyes, all of you are little fellows. Azure said with a smile. The young man almost passed out from anger, but he quickly calmed down and asked curiously, how should I address you, senior? Just call me senior. Then, he carefully sized up the young man in front of him and thought to himself, I didn't expect this guy to have such a strong mental capacity. Didn't this mean that he didn't get anything out of her? The young man thought to himself, and the corner of his mouth twitched. However, he did not dwell on this matter and continued, Senior, how about we have a contest? He had challenged Sung to see if Sung's strength was as he had expected. However, would Sung let him do as he wished? Only to see Azure smile before saying, I'm not interested. The three simple words caused the young man to stagger and almost fall to the ground. Why was this guy so difficult to deal with? The young man was so depressed that he couldn't speak. Then, he heard Sung say, Little guy, you're Dong Fangyue, and you were once called the war god of the divinity, right? Yes, that was a long time ago. The young man, Dong Fangyu, nodded. He did not expect Totoro to know his identity. Oh. It's been quite a long time. It's fine if that idiot Yu is stupid, but this subordinate is as stupid as a pig. Azure said with some disdain. When Dong Fangyu heard Sung's words, it was as if his tail had been stepped on. He jumped up and pounced at Sung while saying fiercely, Don't you dare insult the divine master. Humph. Sung only snorted coldly. Then, he swung his furry tail and sent Dong Fangyu flying. With a loud bang, he crashed into the wall and fell to the ground in the shape of a Chinese character. This scene caused everyone present to be dumbfounded and speechless for a long time. How? How could this be possible? No. They must be seeing things. When they thought of this possibility, the people present could not help but rub their eyes. However, they discovered that Dong Fangyu was still lying on the ground in a large Chinese character. At once, cold sweat trickled down their foreheads. This is real. Oh my god. This was simply too unbelievable. Dong Fangyu was the most powerful among them, but he was sent flying by a Totoro's tail. This was a huge blow to them. It was even more exciting than knowing that Master Yu had a disciple. Or was this the Totoro clan's counterattack? As everyone knew, Totoro's species did not have a high status in the divine realm. Furthermore, their strength was very low. However, they had cute appearances, so they were the favorite pets of many female creatures. But now, These favorite pets did not look cute anymore, and were even a little terrifying. How could they accept this? Could it be that they had been locked up for too long, so long that the divine realm was no longer the divine realm they were once familiar with, and the Totoro clan had also risen in power? For a moment, everyone's thoughts were a little insufficient, and their brains began to short-circuit. Other than standing there in a daze, they didn't make any other reaction. Seeing this, Bing Yao felt a deep sense of sympathy for them. Qing Yang also couldn't bear to see their reactions, because the contrast would be too great, and these people would probably not be able to accept it. After a long while. Only then did Dongfang Yu get up from the ground in a sorry state. Obviously, he had been stunned for a long time. Dongfang Yu looked at the others who were still in a daze and asked with a vigilant look, "Who are you? The Totoro clan can't have such a powerful person like you." Tisk. "You've been locked up for so long, how do you know it's impossible? Let me tell you the truth. You guys are outdated. The divine realm is no longer your era." Tsang's words were somewhat heart-piercing and vicious. After the young man heard it, he fell into a daze and was unable to come back to his senses for a long time. When Tsang saw this, he didn't want to agitate them too much. Therefore, he looked at the people present with disdain a few more times and left. Just like when he came, he didn't take a cloud with him, but left behind a group of dumbfounded people. Of course, it also took Bing Yao and Qing Yang. After intimidating those people, Tsang's mood was great. After it happily returned to the Ning family's courtyard, it became listless again. Seeing the listless Tsang appear in the garden, Uncle Long and the others immediately became nervous. "Senior Tsang, Shuer will be fine. Don't worry too much." Uncle Long couldn't help but comfort him and wipe the cold sweat off his forehead. Senior Tsang's destructive power was shockingly strong, so he was afraid that Tsang Yi would do something irreparable in his anger. Of course, he didn't care if he destroyed the God Lord's manor. It didn't belong to him. Yes. Although Tsang nodded, his face was still expressionless. "Senior Azure, I heard that you like to eat fish, so I specially made some for you to satisfy your cravings." At this time, Qing Xian also coaxed him. "You're the one who likes to eat fish. Your whole family loves to eat fish." Hearing these words, Azure angrily shouted. "Ah!" Qing Xian was depressed. Could it be that his information was wrong? How would he know that whenever he heard the word fish, Azure would uncontrollably think of Leng Ruoxue? Thus, how could he not be angry? "Senior Azure, what do you want to eat? I'll get someone to make it for you." Ning Haolan laughed to himself when he saw his best friend being defeated. Then, he asked with concern. "I don't want to eat anything," Azure said with a lack of interest. Then, it directly laid on the table. "Woo! It just wanted to see Nyo as soon as possible." Tsang lay there for a long time without saying a word. Uncle Long and the others didn't dare to disturb him, much less provoke him. As such, even if they wanted to go back to the bracelet to see Shuer, they didn't dare to summon Green Vessel. Otherwise, who knew what Senior Tsang would do in a fit of anger? Just like that, Uncle Long and the others stayed outside to accompany Azure. At this moment, the glow on Leng Ruoxue's body was getting fainter and fainter. The evildoer and the beasts who had been guarding by her side immediately became more alert when they saw this. They stared at her without blinking. As the light slowly disappeared, Leng Ruoxue's long eyelashes fluttered a few times. Not long after, a pair of limpid eyes slowly opened. "Shuer, you're finally awake." The moment the demon saw her, he immediately pulled Leng Ruoxue into his arms. The beasts could only stare at her helplessly and glowered at the demon. However, the demon did not seem to mind. Leng Ruoxue had just woken up and was still in a daze for a moment. However, when she felt a familiar embrace, she immediately returned the evildoer's embrace and buried her face in his chest. "I'm sorry to have made you worry." Leng Ruoxue knew that her injury would definitely make the people around her extremely worried. The evildoer would definitely blame himself. Hence, she could only try her best to use her body language to comfort the slightly nervous evildoer. Chapter 2140, Intimidate. 3. Don't say sorry, I didn't protect you well. The demon said with heartache. Silly girl, how can I blame you? That was an accident. Leng Ruoxue had already guessed that the demon would think this way, so she quickly explained. At that time, they were all racing against time to save people and did not expect that Wu Chen would rush over so quickly. She was not mentally prepared and was injured by Wu Chen. So in her opinion, it was just an accident. She could only blame herself for not being strong enough. Otherwise, Wu Yan would not have been able to hurt her so easily. Whether it was an accident or not, it was my fault for not protecting you well. The demon said stubbornly. Evildoer, this was really an accident. I don't want you to blame yourself for this. Leng Ruoxue sighed helplessly after hearing the demon's words. Shuer, I won't blame myself. I'm just telling myself that this kind of thing must never happen again. The demon looked at Leng Ruoxue intently and said in a serious tone. Yes, I believe you. Leng Ruoxue nodded. Then, she took the initiative to change the topic and asked, Demon, where are we now? Are you still in the Rimai space? No, I didn't. We have already left that place. He's currently in the Ning family's courtyard in Yu City. The demon said. Then, he hesitated for a moment before saying, it's all thanks to Tsang's diversion tactic, otherwise we would probably still be trapped in the mist. This fact made him extremely depressed. Not only did he fail to protect Shuer, but he also caused her to be injured. He even allowed Tsang to steal the limelight. Thinking of this, his hatred for Tsang increased even more, even if Tsang was their savior. It seems that Azure has helped us again. Leng Ruoxue said with a faint smile. However, she didn't dare to boast too much in front of the evildoer. Otherwise, the evildoer would definitely be filled with jealousy. Right, how are the people we rescued? She asked. They're fine. Don't bother about them. The demon said in an unpleasant tone, If it wasn't for saving them, Shuer wouldn't have been injured. Hence, he didn't have a good impression of those people. Ah. It's good that you're fine. Leng Ruoxue glanced at the evildoer and tactfully stopped talking about those people. Sister, you're finally awake. At this moment, Qing Ju's voice rang in Leng Ruoxue's ears. Following that, Leng Ruoxue saw a little child with teary eyes squeezing between her and the evildoer. When the demon saw this, the veins on his forehead throbbed violently. Then, he grabbed Green Vessel and threw him out of the window. Arg! Qing Ju, Leng Ruoxue was so worried that she could not help but call out. Don't worry, he'll be fine. The evildoer unhappily turned Leng Ruoxue's face away from the window and looked straight at her. Are you really okay? Leng Ruoxue was very worried. She had heard a loud bang. Qing Ju must have suffered a heavy fall. Sister. Just as Leng Ruoxue was thinking about this, a pitiful voice rang in her ears. Immediately after, she saw a chubby child with a swollen face and a bloody nose appear in front of her. The chubby child's clear eyes were still filled with tears, and he looked very miserable. Leng Ruoxue's heart ached when she saw him. She wanted to pull Qing Ju into her arms, but she was stopped by the dark-faced evildoer. The demon glanced at Qing Ju coldly and said indifferently, Shuer, don't be fooled by him. He's just pretending. Ah. Leng Ruoxue was put in a difficult position by the demon's words. Of course, she knew that Qing Ju would not be so badly injured, but... When Qing Ju heard this, he could not help but roar, you're the one pretending. Can't you see that I'm so badly injured? How could it be an act? However, all he received was a look of disdain from the demon. Qing Ju was furious. The consequences should have been very serious, but it was a pity that the two people in front of him could not become his punching bags. He could not bear to part with Leng Ruoxue, but that demonic man was not his match. This fact made him quite depressed. Then, he turned his eyes and looked at the little beastie that was surrounding Ling Ruoxue. The little beasts were all smart. When they saw Qing Ju's unfriendly gaze and knew that he had just been defeated, how could they not understand what he was thinking? Hence, in the next second, they all fought to be the first to pounce into Ling Ruoxue's arms. At this time, they no longer cared about being afraid of the demon. With their master protecting them, they knew that these two fellows would not dare to do anything to them. Upon seeing this, the demon and green vessel's faces darkened at the same time. The cold air from their bodies started to spread out, and the temperature in the purple bamboo house dropped by dozens of degrees instantly. Ling Ruoxue laughed helplessly, then pulled the evildoer's arm and asked, "Where are Uncle Long and the others?" "They're outside." The one who answered her was Green Vessel. "Then let's go out too," Ling Ruoxue said with a smile. "Uncle Long and the others must be anxious from the wait." The demon unwillingly nodded his head while Green Vessel looked at Ling Ruoxue pitifully. The beasties were also talking at the same time to Ling Ruoxue, "Master, we also want to go out." They didn't dare to stay here. Otherwise, Green Vessel would definitely teach them a lesson. "Qing Ju, I'll come and accompany you when I have time." Ling Ruoxue nodded, then pinched Qing Ju's slightly bruised face and smiled. "All right then." Qing Ju pouted his small pink lips and nodded his head in grievance. His dark eyes were filled with tears, and Ling Ruoxue's heart almost softened again. However, the evildoer reminded her from the side, "Uncle Long and the others are still waiting outside." "Yes." Ling Ruoxue nodded. With a thought, she moved the evildoer and the beasts out of the bracelet. After leaving the bracelet, before they could even step out of the room, a snowy white and fluffy little fellow appeared in Ling Ruoxue's arms. "Nyo! You've finally come out." Sang's eyes were filled with tears as he sobbed. "Woo! He finally saw Nyo." After saying that, it buried its head deep into Ling Ruoxue's chest. The evildoer's anger was boiling. That damned guy. He actually dared to take advantage of his woman. He really didn't want to live anymore. The demon was so angry that he wanted to grab Tsang. However, Tsang, who was prepared, would not let him do so. Before his hand could touch Tsang, Tsang had already jumped out of Ling Ruoxue's arms and floated in the air. It stared at the demon with a provocative look. "Damn it! If you have the ability, don't run." Evildoer glared back at Tsang and couldn't help but roar. "Don't run and wait for you to catch me. Do you think I'm that stupid?" Tsang rolled his eyes and said with a look of disdain. However, this time, the evildoer was not angry. Instead, he hugged Ling Ruoxue tightly in his arms. Then, he secretly gave Tsang a victorious look. This time, it was Tsang's turn to be angry. How detestable. It actually fell for that guy's trick. Because that guy clearly wanted to drive him out of Nyo's arms, and he actually did as he wished. Tsang, who had finally reacted, felt depressed. Nyo. At the thought of this, Tsang looked at Ling Ruoxue with its watery eyes. At that moment, Ling Ruoxue felt immense pressure. Ugh! She couldn't take it if all of them used this trick. Furthermore, the evildoer hugged her even tighter and even whispered in her ear, "Shuar, let's go out quickly. Uncle Long and the others have been waiting for a long time." For the first time, he felt that Uncle Long's excuse was so useful. Ling Ruoxue nodded and gave Tsang an apologetic look before she was half pulled and half dragged out of the room by the demon. Seeing this, the fur on Tsang's body stood up again. The next second, a loud explosion was heard and the room Tsang was in was reduced to ruins. Ling Ruoxue and the demon who had just walked out of the room turned around at the same time when they heard the loud noise. They looked at the room that had been reduced to ruins and were speechless. Azure's destructive nature was revealed again. At this moment, Uncle Long and the others heard the noise and immediately rushed over. When they saw that the house had been razed to the ground, everyone was speechless. However, they soon saw Ling Ruoxue and the demon standing at the edge of the ruins. Instantly, Uncle Long and the others were overjoyed. Schwer! Schwer! The crowd shouted in unison. Then, they quickly ran towards Leng Ruoxue and surrounded her, sizing her up. Only after confirming that Leng Ruoxue was safe and sound did Uncle Long and the others finally relax. The master of the Ning family looked at his precious daughter with tears in his eyes, like an abandoned puppy. Uncle Long, godfather, Uncle Ao, I've made you worry. Leng Ruoxue said guiltily. Then, she searched around once more before asking, where's senior brother? Why don't I see senior brother? Uncle Long was at a loss. He didn't know what to say to Schwer. What's wrong, senior brother? Leng Ruoxue looked at Uncle Long's hesitant expression and asked anxiously. Her heart couldn't help but jump into her throat. Could something have happened to senior brother again? But then, she felt something heavy in her arms. She looked down and saw that Song had squeezed between her and the evildoer without fear. Leng Ruoxue silently wiped the cold sweat off her forehead and sneaked a glance at evildoer's pitch-black face and Song's innocent face. She was helpless. At this moment, she heard Song say in a slow tone, that little fellow is fine. It's just that I've brought him into the God-protecting tower. Oh. Leng Ruoxue nodded. It seemed like she could only pray for her senior brother before she understood the situation. I don't even have a sense of existence. Suddenly, a bitter voice interrupted. Chapter 2141, An Old Acquaintance Visits, 1. When Leng Ruoxue heard the voice, she looked up and saw Qing Xian and Ning Haolan standing not too far away. Ning Haolan's handsome face had a faint smile on it, and the person who had spoken with a bitter voice and put on the expression of a bitter wife was Qing Xian. Qing Xian, Ning Haolan, why are you guys here? Leng Ruoxue asked in surprise. We heard that you came to Yu City, so we came to find you. Ning Haolan explained with a smile. I see. Leng Ruoxue nodded and thought to herself, these two must have gone to the land of demons and met the first elder. Otherwise, they wouldn't know that I'm here. However, before Leng Ruoxue could continue, she heard a threatening voice ringing in her ears. If you're still trying to catch me, I'll scratch you. Hearing this, Leng Ruoxue turned towards the source of the voice and saw the demon staring at Song. The two of them were in a stalemate. One wanted to stay in Leng Ruoxue's arms, while the other was trying hard to get a certain beast out of Leng Ruoxue's arms. The certain beast flashed its sharp little claws threateningly. Seeing this scene, everyone was helpless. Leng Ruoxue sighed and threw Song into the arms of the evildoer. You two should bond well. Don't fight. With Leng Ruoxue's words, the two cockfight-like guys immediately became listless. The evildoer acted as if there was something dirty in his arms and quickly threw Song away from Leng Ruoxue's arms. Instantly, a shooting star flew across the sky and disappeared. The demon still cast Song aside. This scene stunned everyone for a long time before they recovered. But after they recovered, they didn't know how to evaluate this matter. Only the evil man would dare to do such a thing to Song. Uncle Long and the others thought. However, Qing Xian and Ning Haolan, who did not know the truth, looked at evildoer worriedly. Qing Xian even patted evildoer's shoulder sympathetically and reminded him, Sai, you're out of luck. Hurry up and run. Run away. Oh. It's time to run. The demon nodded in agreement. Then, he pulled Schwer and disappeared. Damn it, what kind of rotten idea did you come up with? Seeing that Leng Ruoxue and the evildoer had teleported away, the master of the Ning family was so angry that he kicked Qing Xian's butt and shouted. Uncle Long and Ao Jia also looked at Qing Xian with disapproval. Their expressions were not friendly. How did I come up with a bad idea? I'm just thinking about his life. Qing Xian covered his butt with one hand and said in an aggrieved manner. It's a bad idea. Then, he stepped on Qing Xian's shoulder and chased after Leng Ruoxue. The other beasts who had followed Leng Ruoxue out of the bracelet did the same. They all used Qing Xian as a stepping stone and chased after Leng Ruoxue one by one. Uncle Long sighed and stared deeply at Qing Xian for a long time. When Qing Xian's hair stood on end from his stare, his figure flickered and he also teleported away. Ao Jia and the master of the Ning family followed. Both of them glared at Qing Xian with an unpleasant expression before disappearing. For a moment, only Qing Xian and Ning Haolan were left in the courtyard, still confused by the situation. The judges have left? Qing Xian was stunned and asked in a daze. AI. Let's go too. Ning Haolan sighed helplessly. Sometimes, this good friend of his was really hopelessly stupid. This was great, he had offended quite a few people and beastie. This time, he would probably be the one to suffer. Even though he had good intentions, it was a pity that the other party didn't seem to need it at all. She even took the opportunity to leave with Leng Ruoxue and spend some alone time with her. With that, Ning Haolan pulled the still dumbfounded Qing Xian and left the courtyard. On the way, Qing Xian even asked in a silly manner, "Haolan, where are we going?" "I'll go to the land of demons, you can go wherever you want." Ning Haolan shot a glance at Qing Xian as he spoke indifferently. "I'll go with you," Qing Xian quickly said. By the time the two of them arrived at the land of demons, Leng Ruoxue and the rest were already seated in the garden. They had also finished exchanging pleasantries with the first elder and the others. Looking at their travel-worn bodies, the first elder smiled and said, "Hee hee. Of all these people, you guys are the slowest to return." We encountered some accidents," Qing Xian said, a little embarrassed. "Yup. It's a big surprise." Ning Haolan's face darkened. "What's wrong? Don't tell me you've been entangled by a woman." First elder made a nosy guess when he saw Ning Haolan's furious expression. Ning Haolan's face darkened even more at his words. "Looks like I'm right. I just don't know which one of you is the rotten peach blossom," the grand elder asked with great interest. The others also turned to look at Ning Haolan and Qing Xian, their faces full of curiosity. "Of course it's his," the two of them said in unison. "Ah." The crowd was stunned, and the curiosity on their faces intensified. It seemed like there was more to this. Don't blame them for being so nosy. The atmosphere had been too tense previously, especially when First Elder and the rest heard that Leng Ruoxue was injured. They were extremely worried. Now that they finally had something to do to pass the time, they naturally wouldn't want to let it go. This could be considered a form of relaxation. He was the one who provoked them. Ning Haolan said through gritted teeth. "How can you blame me? I didn't seduce her." Qing Xian felt wronged. "Then why would she follow you?" Ning Haolan roared in anger. Qing Xian was at a loss for words. In fact, he didn't know what to say. "What's going on?" Leng Ruoxue glanced at the two of them and asked. "Shuer, you have to uphold justice for me. It's really not my fault." The moment Qing Xian heard Leng Ruoxue's question, he seemed to feel even more aggrieved. Then, he told everyone what had happened. As it turned out, on their way back to the demonic land, Qing Xian was hungry and wanted to eat something, so he went hunting. However, he did not expect that he would fall for the same prey as a certain woman, and the two of them had a small dispute. In the end, Qing Xian got his hands on the prey, and the woman treated him as her prey, chasing after him all the way. Then, she saw Ning Haolan, planning to kill two birds with one stone and take down both of them. Just like that, the two of them were entangled by this love-struck woman. In the end, Qing Xian even rejoiced and said, "It's a good thing we ran away quickly. Otherwise, we would have been captured by her. That woman is really a robber." "Humph. You're snatching things from a woman, and you still have the nerve to say that? If you had just given the prey to that woman, we might not have been caught," Ning Haolan said angrily after hearing Cheng Xuan's endless words. "On what basis? I was the one who caught the prey first." Qing Xian was unhappy when he heard this. Although he always thought that he had a tender heart for women, he never had any thoughts of being tender to women when it came to food. Chapter 2142, an old acquaintance visits, too. Besides, even if I give the prey to that woman, how do you know she won't bother us? Qing Xian said, unconvinced. I agree with Qing Xian's words. With your looks and temperament, it's impossible for you two not to be entangled by some love-struck woman. However, didn't she fail to catch up to you? So, you guys shouldn't have anything to worry about. Leng Ruoxue smiled as she tried to calm the infuriated Ning Haolan. As for Qing Xian, that heartless fellow, he didn't take this matter to heart at all. Hearing Leng Ruoxue's comforting words, Ning Haolan had to swallow his anger. Otherwise, old Grand Madam would be the first to come after him. However, he still secretly glared at Qing Xian and then went to find a place to rest. Leng Ruoxue and the rest also had a good rest for a few days. A few days later, there were guests at the door. Leng Ruoxue was surprised for a long time when she heard that Meng Bao had come to visit. Moreover, they had not contacted each other since the elite competition. So, she really couldn't figure out how Meng Bao had found his way here. She really did not remember telling Meng Bao that she lived here. But then she thought about it. Even if she didn't tell Meng Bao, with the current reputation of the land of evil demons, it shouldn't be difficult for him to find this place, right? With this thought in mind, Leng Ruoxue went out to welcome Meng Bao. Ha ha ha. Leng Ruoxue, I'm here to see you. Leng Ruoxue heard Meng Bao's loud voice before she even entered the garden. Thank you, he said. Leng Ruoxue's face was filled with black lines as she sighed helplessly. This guy was still so forthright. Leng Ruoxue, you've made this place look pretty good. Meng Bao praised him. He felt that his eyes were not enough to look at him anymore. He thought to himself, should I also build a mountain and occupy it as a king? Thank you, he said. Leng Ruoxue thanked him once again because she really didn't know how to respond to Meng Bao's words. In fact, she really wanted to ask him why he was here this time. However, he had already said that he was here to see her, so it wasn't appropriate for her to take the initiative to ask. Leng Ruoxue, are you still with that pretty boy? Suddenly, Meng Bao scuttled to Leng Ruoxue's side and whispered into her ear. However, her voice was not soft, so the crowd could not pretend that they did not hear her. Suddenly, they all had a strange look on their faces and looked at Meng Bao with even more curiosity. Ah! Of course, we're together. Leng Ruoxue was confused. What did this guy mean? Could it be that she had taken a fancy to the demon and wanted them to separate? However, she didn't think that the evildoer would be this tomboy's type. At the thought of this, she glanced at the corner silently because the evildoer was hiding in the corner and eavesdropping. Upon hearing this, Meng Bao was disappointed. Then, he heard Meng Bao say, "What's so good about that pretty boy? He can't even lift his arms. I don't think he can last more than 3 days in bed." When everyone heard this, they fell silent. On the other hand, Leng Ruoxue's face was slightly red and filled with embarrassment. This guy really dared to say anything. In fact, she really wanted to ask Meng Bao, how do you know that the demon can't last 3 days in bed? However, she couldn't say it out loud. As for the demon who was eavesdropping in the corner, he was so angry that the veins on his forehead were popping. At this moment, he almost rushed out to prove that his physical strength was very good, but he held it in. He kept comforting himself and telling himself not to argue with a rough woman. What's wrong? I guessed it right. Aya, if you can't, you should quickly change to another man. A woman's sexual happiness is very important. Seeing that Leng Ruoxue was silent for a long time, Meng Bao continued to speak. Her words made everyone break out in cold sweat. They couldn't bear to listen to her anymore. She was really a powerful person. Uncle Long and the others slowly moved out of the garden without a sound. They kept feeling a cold wind in the garden, and a murder could happen at any time, so it seemed safer to leave. However, they also wanted to watch a good show, so they were very conflicted. After thinking for a long time, Uncle Long and the others felt that their lives were more important. They didn't find any excuses and directly swaggered out of the garden. However, they didn't go far. Instead, they hid in an inconspicuous corner outside the garden and continued to watch the show. Do you want me to introduce you to someone? Seeing that there were no outsiders in the garden, Meng Bao spoke even more unscrupulously. He even poked Leng Ruoxu's arm with a look of understanding and revealed a wretched smile. The expression on his face seemed to be saying, I understand. When Leng Ruoxu saw this, she could not help but wipe away the cold sweat on her forehead and hurriedly said, Thank you for your kind intentions, but it's enough for me to have a demon. I'm not interested in other men. When she said this, Leng Ruoxu was so scared that her little heart was trembling. She was afraid that the demon would suddenly jump out and kill her to vent his anger. She did not wish for Meng Bao to die in her own home. After all, she had a good impression of this person. At least compared to some hypocritical women, Meng Bao was very real and would say whatever he wanted. AI. That's really a pity. I was going to introduce you to a top-grade person. Meng Bao said with a look of pity. What? Leng Ruoxu was suspicious. Could it be that Meng Bao was here to introduce a man to her? I'm telling you. I met two of the best men on the way. Those two men. That face, that figure, all of them were absolutely top-notch. Just looking at them would make one drool. However, they managed to escape. What a pity. The regret on Meng Bao's face was unconcealed. When Leng Ruoxu heard her words, the doubts in her heart grew even deeper. Why did these words sound so familiar? Had she heard of something similar somewhere? If they don't run away, I'll definitely catch them. Oh right, I can give you one. How can a woman complain about having too many men? Seeing that Leng Ruoxu did not respond, Meng Bao continued. At this moment, Leng Ruoxu was completely immersed in Meng Bao's words. She did not hear Meng Bao say that he wanted to give her a man. However, the demon heard it clearly and saw that Shuai did not refute it. Hence, he was filled with jealousy and hatred. The two unlucky men who were hiding in some unknown corner were also on his mind. Shuai, what's there to eat? I'm hungry. Qing Xian's voice rang out in the garden, before he strode in with Ning Haolan by his side. I've finally found you too. Suddenly, Meng Bao let out a loud roar. Then, she jumped up in shock and dashed in front of Qing Xian. Qing Xian and Ning Haolan looked as if they had seen a ghost when they saw Meng Bao. Oh my God! Why did this female fiend chase him all the way here? The two men's faces were deathly pale as they pointed at Meng Bao, trembling with fear and unable to speak. Hee hee. We really have ape shit. Meng Bao saw that Qing Xian and Ning Haolan were also very excited and happy. In fact, they were obviously frightened. Chapter 2143, An Old Acquaintance Visits, 3. At this moment, Leng Ruoxu had also returned to her senses. Seeing the inharmonious relationship between the three of them, she also understood. No wonder she felt that Meng Bao's words were so familiar. It turned out that she had heard it from Qing Xian before. It was just that the roles in his words had been reversed. Shuai, save me. Qing Xian was shocked. Then, he quickly hid behind Leng Ruoxu to seek protection. Ning Haolan did the same. However, he maintained his elegant demeanor as a noble young master, unlike Qing Xian, who didn't care about his image and was impatient. Ugh! Leng Ruoxu's forehead was filled with black lines. What was going on? Was there a need for two grown men to be so scared of a woman? No, he saw a tomboy. But he didn't have to be so scared. She did not understand. However, what surprised her even more was that the men Meng Bao had taken a fancy to were Qing Xian and Ning Haolan. It seemed that Meng Bao's taste had improved quite a bit after not seeing them for so long. She just did not know how Zhou Kun was doing. Leng Ruoxu, you know them. They can't be your men, right? Upon seeing this, Meng Bao squinted his eyes and walked up to Leng Ruoxu. We are Shuai's men, so don't you dare have any ideas about us. Without giving Leng Ruoxu a chance to answer, Qing Xian quickly rushed to say. Hearing this, Leng Ruoxue wiped the cold sweat off her forehead without a word. The evildoer in the corner clenched his fist. Damn it! Qing Xian was dead. The evil demon said hatefully. Although he knew that Qing Xian was only using Shu'er as a shield, he was still unhappy. Moreover, he also wanted to hear how Qing Xian was going to cover up his lie, so he hid and did not come out. Leng Ruoxue. Are they really your men? After hearing Qing Xian's words, Meng Bao asked doubtfully. Then, she thought for a while and said, Don't you only have one man, that pretty boy? Why are there two more? We can't see the light. You understand. Qing Xian was afraid that Leng Ruoxue would deny it, so he rushed to answer again. When Leng Ruoxue heard this, she only looked at Qing Xian sympathetically. She neither admitted nor denied it. However, she knew that Qing Xian was going to be in deep trouble. So that's how it is. Don't worry, I won't tell anyone. Meng Bao seemed to believe her now. He then gave Leng Ruoxue a knowing look, which left her speechless. Meng Bao continued, Leng Ruoxue. When you don't want these two men anymore, can I take over? She still couldn't give up. Although it was said that one shouldn't play with a friend's husband, she really had a good impression of these two men. Don't you like Zhou Kun's sturdy and durable ones? I don't think they meet your requirements, right? Meng Bao's words almost drove Leng Ruoxue mad, but she could not help but ask. Yup. But that doesn't stop me from liking them. Their bodies were very strong. Although I can't compare to Zhou Kun, I can barely accept it. Meng Bao said honestly. You've been wronged. Leng Ruoxue really wanted to say this to Meng Bao after hearing his words. However, before she had a chance to speak, Qing Xian was so frightened that he quickly said, Our bodies aren't strong at all, don't force yourself. Besides, Shu'er won't abandon us. So, you should give up as soon as possible. Who knows what will happen in the future? Meng Bao said nonchalantly. Then, he gave Qing Xian a charming look. However, what should have been a very charming move was a little out of place when it was done by a tough woman like her. Qing Xian almost vomited. Fuck. He really couldn't stand such stimulation. At this moment, Qing Xian made up his mind to stay away from terrifying women in the future, especially this kind of thirsty woman. It was really a test of one's heart's endurance. Meng Bao, how are things between you and Zhou Kun? Leng Ruoxue saw that this triangular relationship was not easy to deal with and quickly changed the topic. It's all right. He's already married to me, and is currently at home looking after his wife and raising his children. Meng Bao said proudly. Upon hearing this, Leng Ruoxue broke out in cold sweat once again. Zhou Kun was taking care of his wife and raising his children at home. You're out hunting for women. Leng Ruoxue was speechless about this, but Meng Bao took it for granted. From this, it could be seen how strong and different Meng Bao's heart was. Then I really have to congratulate you on getting your wish. After a long while, Leng Ruoxue finally spoke. Hee. Thank you. Meng Bao was extremely pleased with himself. After all, there were not many women in the divine realm who could marry a man. By the way, how long have you been out? Aren't you worried at home? Following that, Leng Ruoxue asked in a very reserved manner, You should go home now. However, Meng Bao could not hear such a profound hidden meaning. Therefore, he said indifferently, I've only been out for half a year. My family won't worry about me. I don't need to worry about my family either. My brothers will help me take care of them. That's good. Leng Ruoxue had nothing else to say, but she could not just ask him to leave. After all, other than wanting to beat up Qing Xian and Ning Haolan, Meng Bao had not done anything that was too annoying. Just like that, Meng Bao became one of Leng Ruoxue's guests and temporarily stayed in the Leng clan's main residence. If she did, Qing Xian and Ning Haolan would be in for a tragedy. Although Meng Bao didn't directly pester the two, his eyes were fixed on them. He was absolutely focused and didn't look away. After a few days, the two of them tolerated it. However, after staying here for several days, Meng Bao did not have any intention of leaving, which made them a little scared. In the end, the two of them simply locked themselves in their room. Out of sight, out of mind. Uncle Long and the others had also watched a good show because of Meng Bao's arrival. Therefore, they were extremely enthusiastic about Meng Bao, which moved him to the point of tears. In the blink of an eye, half a month had passed. Song, who had been thrown out by the demon, had not appeared. Leng Ruoxua started to worry. Evildoer, is Azure angry? Otherwise, why hasn't he appeared? In the garden, Leng Ruoxua looked worriedly at the demon sitting opposite her. Angry? It won't be angry with you, don't worry. The evildoer consoled her, but his expression was one of disapproval. He had been causing trouble for Qing Xian and Ning Haolan recently, so he really had no time to think about Song. However, he was certain that even if Song was angry, he would be angry at him and not at Shuai. As expected, just as evildoer finished speaking, Azure's voice rang out in the garden. Nyo. I'm coming. As soon as she finished speaking, a snowy white, furry little thing appeared in Leng Ruoxua's arms. Song. Where have you been all this time? Leng Ruoxua hugged Song tightly and asked with concern. Sensing Leng Ruoxua's worry, Azure was very pleased. Then, it said with a proud expression, hee hee. I'm giving a certain someone special training for you. Chapter 2144, The Brothers Meet Again, 1, What? Leng Ruoxua had a suspicious look on her face. She had never heard of anyone having special training. Those people. They've been locked up for too long, and their strength is no longer the same as before. So, I'm giving them special training. In fact, the special training was just an excuse. In fact, it was venting its dissatisfaction with the evil man on those people. Therefore, it trained them particularly miserably. It just didn't know if those people would learn to be obedient after these days of inhuman special training. Song is tired. By the way, have those people recovered from their injuries? Leng Ruoxua had heard from Qing Ju that those people were her master's subordinates, so she naturally paid some attention to them. However, those people were no different from strangers to her, so when she found out that they had been taken away by Tsang, she had not been concerned about their situation. Thinking about it, since they could become master's subordinates, their adaptability should not be bad. Most of them have recovered and have even recovered to their peak strength. However, those people are not easy to deal with. If you want them to acknowledge you, I'm afraid it will take time. Tsang looked at Leng Ruoxua and asked worriedly. Although he had given those people special training for a long time and they were all like obedient babies in front of him, Tsang knew that being obedient in front of him didn't mean that he trusted Nyo. Originally, those people had a bit of arrogance and their eyes were on the top of their heads. It was very difficult to enter their eyes. Now that they had recovered their original strength, wanting to obtain their acknowledgement was even more difficult than before. However, Azure wouldn't directly exterminate them just because they didn't listen. After all, in its eyes, those people would definitely be Nyo's best whetstone. If they were obediently obedient, he might not even look at them. It was precisely because of this idea that it had tried its best to help those people recover their strength. Now, it was time to see the results. At that time, it would naturally be clear who was good and who was bad, and who could be used. You need time. Do I have to gain their approval? Leng Ruoxua blinked her eyes and asked after listening to Wan Song. Although those people were her master's subordinates, she felt that she did not have to use them. After all, she was well aware that those people used to have extraordinary identities and would not easily trust her. What she hated the most was trouble. Instead of using people who looked down on her for the sake of her master, she would rather train her own helpers. Hee hee. Nyo obviously doesn't need their approval, but I feel that you should prove to them that not acknowledging you was a wrong choice, and at the same time show them your strength. Ruthlessly crush them. Beat them to the ground. Azure said with a gloating expression. All right. Then I'll receive them in the living room. After hearing Tsang's words, Leng Ruoxua agreed. They would have to meet sooner or later, so it was better to meet now than to choose another day. With that, Leng Ruoxue, evildoer and Sung, the two humans and one beast walked towards the living room. When they reached the living room, Leng Ruoxue indicated for Tsang to move the people out of the god pagoda. When Dongfang Yu and the others came out, they were a little confused for a moment, but they soon recovered. When they saw Leng Ruoxue and the evil demon standing in the middle of the living room, they were clearly stunned. Then, Dongfang Yu glanced at Tsang before he carefully opened his mouth, and you are? The man and woman in front of him were simply too outstanding. Not only were the two of them beautiful, but their bearing was also extraordinary. It was obvious that they were not ordinary people. Moreover, they were both divine emperors, but judging from their auras, they should be stronger than ordinary divine emperors. I'm Leng Ruoxue, he's my fiancé. Leng Ruoxue said calmly. She could tell that the man who spoke was the strongest among them. However, looking at how careful he was, could it be that he had been trained very badly by Tsang? Leng Ruoxue started to pity him. When Tsang trained others, he was never soft-hearted. You are Master Yes disciple. Dongfang Yu confirmed. He had heard the Totoro mention this name before. Yes. Leng Ruoxue nodded but did not say anything. She waited for him to continue. However, Dongfang Yu did not know what to say. Firstly, he did not expect Master Yes' female disciple to look so weak. Secondly, he did not expect Leng Ruoxue to have the strength of a divine sovereign. This was beyond his expectations. Yes' subordinates were secretly following Dongfang Yu's lead. If he didn't speak, others wouldn't dare to speak even if they had thousands of things to say in their hearts. Moreover, there was a Totoro staring at them like a tiger watching its prey. They didn't know if they had said something wrong and made the Totoro unhappy. Would it tear them in two in anger? However, there was no lack of people in this world who were not content with their place and liked to find trouble. Seeing that no one was speaking, Yaoji glanced at Leng Ruoxue before looking at the evildoer. She then said with a look of disdain, you may be Master Yes' disciple, but we may not listen to you. Upon hearing this, Leng Ruoxue was agitated and excited. Was he trying to pick a fight? That's great. He wasn't afraid of them finding fault, he was only afraid of them ignoring him. As long as they were willing to find trouble, he would have a reason to attack. Wasn't it? Moreover, she felt that this woman was hostile to her. Why was that? Even if the same sex repelled each other, there was no need to be hostile to a woman he had just met, right? Moreover, he was her savior. Was he another ingrate? At the thought of this, Leng Ruoxue's eyes turned cold as she glared back. She had never been afraid of anyone in her life. Moreover, this woman was only a divine emperor. She didn't have the strength to compete with a divine emperor. Following that, Leng Ruoxue also spoke with an indifferent expression, it doesn't matter. I've already done my master a favor by saving you. As for you, you can go wherever you want. You. Do you know who we are? You actually dare to speak to us like this? Hearing Leng Ruoxue's nonchalant tone, Yaoji was instantly enraged. In the past, people like them could call the wind and summon the rain in the immortal realm. But now, a little girl was actually looking down on them. How could the proud Yaoji take this? I know you are my master's subordinates. Leng Ruoxue smiled faintly. She then continued, do you know who I am? You? Aren't you Master Yes' disciple? Yaoji didn't quite understand what Leng Ruoxue meant and asked in a daze. I'm not just Master's disciple, I'm also your savior. You. Is this how you treat your savior? If I had known that you were a bunch of ingrates, I wouldn't have risked my life to save you. Leng Ruoxue said coldly. As she spoke, her beautiful eyes swept across the people present. She noticed that a few of them had a look of embarrassment on their faces. Chapter 2145, The Brothers Meet Again, 2. Following that, Leng Ruoxue continued, of course, I don't need you to repay me. I've never thought of asking you to listen to my orders. I saved you all because of Master. Now that someone has made their stand clear, please leave immediately. She asked him to leave. After she finished speaking, Leng Ruoxue could clearly see the shocked expressions on many people's faces. It was obvious that they did not expect her to say such words. However, Leng Ruoxue did not say these words to play hard to get. It was a decision that she had made after meeting these people. These people were all arrogant and unruly people. It was not easy to make them as loyal to him as they were to their master, and he did not like to force people to do things. Therefore, letting them go was the most correct choice. Maybe they would even look at him in a higher light. Dongfang Yu and the others didn't respond for a long time after Leng Ruoxue finished speaking. Yaoji, who had started the fight, widened her eyes in disbelief. In fact, other than her jealousy, she had provoked Leng Ruoxue because she didn't want to be under a young girl. That would make her feel very aggrieved. But now, she didn't know what to do. According to their prior discussion, they wanted to first see if Leng Ruoxue had potential and whether she was worthy of their assistance before deciding on their future plans. However, due to her provocation, things had clearly deviated from their planned trajectory. This gave her a bad feeling for no reason. Then, she sneaked a glance at Dongfang Yu and saw that his brows were tightly furrowed as if he was thinking about something. This made her feel even more uncertain. They wouldn't blame him for ruining things, right? Yaoji was so aggrieved that she was about to cry. The hatred he had for Leng Ruoxue grew even deeper. That detestable Leng Ruoxue. If she had not said such words, would she need to be on tenterhooks? After a long time. Since Miss Leng is so righteous, we'll take our leave first, Dongfang Yu said gloomily. Thank you for saving our lives, Miss Leng. We'll definitely repay you in the future if we have the chance. He addressed Leng Ruoxue as Miss Leng, which was enough to show his attitude that Leng Ruoxue had nothing to do with them. When the others heard Dongfang Yu's words, they all looked at him with their mouths agape, as if they couldn't believe what he said. Let's go. Dongfang Yu said to the others with a bitter smile. Then, everyone present left the living room with Dongfang Yu and left the Leng family's main residence. As he watched them leave, the evildoer said indifferently, Shuer, are we just going to let them go like this? What else? You can keep people, but you can't keep your heart. I don't want some half-hearted people. Besides, they're only testing me. They'll come back. These people were very loyal to her master, but she wasn't her master. She couldn't ask them to be loyal to her just because they were loyal to her master. That was simply unrealistic and would cause them to have a rebellious heart. Wasn't that woman the best example? However, she admitted that she didn't have much luck with women, so she didn't really care about that woman's attitude. However, if they turned back, she wouldn't allow anyone to treat her with that kind of attitude. Girl, you did well. At this time, Azure spoke with a look of agreement. In this day and age, rushing was not a business. Therefore, if he wanted to subdue those people, he could only wait for them to deliver themselves to his door. They must have thought it through by then. But at that time, it wouldn't be easy for them to occupy an important position in Nyo's heart. To them, this was a huge loss. Thinking of this, Tsang couldn't help but smile evilly. Following that, the two humans and one beast left the living room and went to the garden to meet up with Uncle Long and the others. As soon as they entered the garden, Uncle Long and the others pulled Leng Ruoxue aside and asked her about it. Shuer, how is it? Have those people been subdued? Uncle Long asked anxiously. No, I haven't. I drove them away. Leng Ruoxue said with a smile. Ah. The moment Leng Ruoxue said this, Uncle Long and the rest were stunned. Shuer actually drove him away. After a long while, Uncle Long and the others came back to their senses. Then, the master of the Ning family couldn't help but ask, Shuer, why is that? Those people are quite strong, and some of them were even my idols in the past. They're not very satisfied with me, so why should I keep them? I don't have that kind of spare money. Leng Ruoxue said nonchalantly. Ah. That's true. Hearing this, the master of the Ning family understood. Among those people, most of them had already been famous for many years when he was still very young. It was certain that they had pride in their hearts, and it was indeed difficult to make them submit to a little girl. However, Shuai was their savior. In order to save them, they almost lost their lives. How could they just leave like that? At this moment, the master of the Ning family was a little unhappy with them. At the same time, he ignored the fact that Leng Ruoxue was the one who had chased them out. Who asked him to shield her? After that, Uncle Long and the others were afraid that Leng Ruoxue would feel bad, so they quickly changed the topic and told Leng Ruoxue a lot of interesting things that she did not know. Of course, they were all things that had happened at home recently and were related to Meng Bao. Leng Ruoxue could feel the care and concern Uncle Long and the others had for her, and her heart was filled with warmth. These people were people she acknowledged and were also her family. They were people she had to protect with all her might, and it was because of this that they had a very important place in her heart. As for the subordinates of her master, they didn't have a sense of belonging to her, so how could she not feel the same towards them? After Dong Fangyu left the Leng family's main residence with his men, he didn't say a word. Seeing this, the others didn't dare to speak either. Yaoji was also like a frightened little rabbit, not daring to look at Dong Fangyu's cold expression. Brother Yu, where are we going? At this time, Uncle Lien walked to Dong Fangyu's side and asked in a low voice. Go and meet up with Lin and the others. Dong Fangyu said indifferently. Can we find them now? Uncle Lien asked with uncertainty. Let's try. Dong Fangyu wasn't too sure either, but he wouldn't say anything that would make his team lose confidence. Soon, they left the land of demons. Then, Dong Fangyu led the group to the most remote place in the Divine Realm, the Icy Land. The northernmost part of the Divine Realm was the place with the harshest and worst living conditions. Not only was it covered in ice all year round, but the spiritual qi there was also not as rich as other places. There were even fewer people there. Even beasts who were not too picky about their living environment did not like to find that place as their territory. However, Dong Fangyu had to go there. When Leng Ruoxue and the rest heard the news from the silver rats, they were puzzled for a long time. In the end, they finally realized that Dong Fangyu must have gone there to look for someone. If it was just to avoid the miasma search, there was no need to go to such a remote place. Chapter 2146, The Brothers Meet Again, 3. As for who they were looking for, Leng Ruoxue and the rest had no idea. Leng Ruoxue only ordered the silver rats to continue keeping an eye on him. Then, she went off to bond with the newly born second senior brother. A month later, Dong Fangyu and the others had arrived at a place called Black Fog City. That place was shrouded in fog all year round. Even during the day, the weather was gloomy, and the cold wind was blowing. People who just went there would be unable to bear the cold. Therefore, there were not many deities living in Black Fog City. When Dong Fangyu and the others arrived, they immediately looked for an inn. It was the only inn in Black Fog City. Moreover, the business was so cold that the shopkeeper and waiters in the inn were a little drowsy. The shopkeeper and the waiters were immediately excited when they saw the guests who had come to stay with great difficulty. After they enthusiastically sent Dong Fangyu and the others to the rooms, they immediately began to nag at them about their well-being and even prepared some food for them. However, when they saw the food, Dong Fangyu and the others immediately lost their appetites. I'm sorry, this place is too far away, so there are limited ingredients. Everyone, please make do with this. The shopkeeper said apologetically. However, he was not really apologetic. After all, the people of the Divine Realm did not have to eat food. We don't want to eat. Shopkeeper, please leave. Dong Fangyu didn't have much of an appetite, and seeing that the others were also uninterested, he said to the shopkeeper, all right then. I'll take my leave first. If there's anything you need, please don't hesitate to tell me. The shopkeeper said very politely. All right. Dong Fangyu nodded and then gave Uncle Lien a look. Uncle Lien understood and immediately went to plug the door in. He even specially checked it. Brother Yu. Are Lin and the others really here? Uncle Lien asked in disbelief. Yes. Dongfang Yu nodded but did not say much. In fact, he was so certain because he had a special secret code between him and Lin. Only he and Lin knew this secret code. He had followed Lin's secret code to come here, but he had not told anyone about it. Rest early. Dongfang Yu continued. Uncle Lien nodded and left Dongfang Yu's room. Dongfang Yu sat cross-legged on his bed and closed his eyes to rest. The next morning, Dongfang Yu only bid his farewells to Uncle Lien before leaving the inn. It was already afternoon when they returned. Uncle Lien saw that Dongfang Yu was travel-worn and tired, so he didn't ask any questions. He only told him to rest well and didn't disturb him. 3 days later, a young man came to the door. At that time, Dongfang Yu was chatting with Uncle Lien in the room. When he saw the young man, Dongfang Yu was so excited that he couldn't speak. He stared at the man in front of him in a daze. Big brother. The young man's eyes were filled with tears when he saw Dongfang Yu, and he called out in an excited voice. Lin. After a while, Dongfang Yu came back to his senses and looked at the young man in excitement. The next second, the two men hugged each other tightly. Seeing this scene, Uncle Lien couldn't help but shed tears. The young man was Dongfang Yu's younger brother. His name was Dongfang Lin. As for these two brothers, one was good at fighting while the other was good at strategizing. It could be said that the two of them had joined forces. Back in the days, they were all powerful in the divine realm and were proud of the divine realm. However, at the same time, the two of them had disappeared without a trace for a very long time. In the current divine realm, the two of them had long become taboo legends and had even disappeared from the sight of everyone. At least, in the current divine realm, there were not many people who knew the names of the two brothers. Moreover, most of them had gone into seclusion. After slightly calming down, Dongfang Lin asked about his big brother's recent situation. When he found out that his big brother had been imprisoned by fog ice, Dongfang Lin was filled with guilt. He had once searched for Dongfang Yu and the others for a long time, but unfortunately, he had found nothing. Moreover, the group of people he had brought with him had been chased by the fog. At that time, even if he wanted to continue looking for Dongfang Yu and the others, he had no strength. In order to preserve his strength, he had led his people to live in seclusion here. After all, those who had followed him were the descendants of Master Ye's loyal subordinates. He had to ensure their safety first. Therefore, he had stopped searching for Dongfang Yu and the others. However, when he saw his big brother, all the guilt he had felt for so many years surged up. Big brother. I'm sorry that you've suffered for so many years. If I had known that you were in the hands of Wu Chen, I would have found a way to save you. Dongfang Lin said with a face full of shame. In fact, the two brothers had each led a group of people to escape that year. Although his big brother had shouldered the mission of drawing away the pursuers, the people who had followed his big brother were stronger than them. As a result, he had never thought that his big brother and the others would be captured and imprisoned by the fog. After all, in his heart, he had always felt that it would not be a problem for his big brother and the others to escape the fog. Moreover, at that time, in order to avoid the pursuit of Wu Jing, they could only keep hiding here and there. Naturally, they were relatively isolated from the outside world. Therefore, he really did not receive any news from his big brother. However, he knew clearly that his big brother was still alive. Therefore, he did not expect that something would happen to his big brother and the others. After sneakily searching for his big brother and the others for a period of time, he temporarily gave up for the sake of the overall situation. However, in order for the two of them to be able to meet smoothly in the future, he had deliberately left some secret signals in some inconspicuous places that only his big brother could understand, hoping that his big brother would find him one day. But he did not expect that he would wait for so long. When he thought of this, Dongfang Lin's guilt grew deeper. Seeing this, Dongfang Yu sighed and said, Lin, back then, we were caught of our own free will. What? Dongfang Lin was shocked when he heard this. He looked at Dongfang Yu with a dumbfounded expression, unable to speak. That year, we knew that Master Yu was in the hands of Wu Yan. In order to save Master Yu, we sneaked back into Yu City. Later, Wu Yan lied to us. As long as we surrendered, she would let Master Yu go. However, we didn't expect that Master Yu would still die in the end. Dongfang Yu said with a sorrowful expression. Rai mice. Hearing this, Dongfang Lin gnashed his teeth in hatred. Although he had never personally experienced what his big brother was talking about, he could imagine what the ripple mist would do. How did Master Yu fall? Dongfang Lin couldn't help but ask. That year, after the incident, Master Yu immediately arranged for them to leave. Although he wanted to stay by Master Ye's side at the time, Master Yu did not allow it and made him swear to protect the remaining bloodline of each family. He did as he was told and left the imperial city with those people. However, his heart had always been worried about every move of the imperial city. Chapter 2147, The Brothers Meet Again. 4. At that time, he was willing to leave easily because Master Yu said that if they stayed, he would be distracted and unable to concentrate on dealing with Wu Chen. When he heard this, he could only leave Yu City with those children. Who would have thought that he would hear the news of Master Ye's death? Wu Yan had become a divine master, and his brother and the others were nowhere to be found. He had led a group of young people and could only hide and live a difficult life. But fortunately, they had finally made it through the most difficult period. I'm not too sure about the specific situation. Dongfang Yu said gloomily. It doesn't matter, we'll find out eventually. Big brother. Let's go. It'll bring you to meet the others. Dongfang Lin didn't want his big brother to be immersed in the unhappy memories of the past, so he immediately changed the topic. All right. Dongfang Yu nodded and left the inn with Dongfang Lin. Dongfang Lin led Dongfang Yu and the others through a few streets before arriving at an unremarkable courtyard. The small courtyard looked ordinary, but it was a whole new world inside. Dongfang Lin led them into a room. Then, after casting a few spells, the middle of the wall split apart, revealing a secret passage. Following the secret passage, Dongfang Yu and the others saw a magnificent underground castle. The castle was like a small city, with all the essentials. People could be seen busy everywhere. When they saw Dongfang Lin, many of them greeted him warmly. Dongfang Lin replied with a smile. Then, he led Dongfang Yu and the others to the meeting hall in the castle. The meeting hall was already filled with people. Moreover, many people were looking forward to it, and some even looked anxious. When Dongfang Lin led Dongfang Yu and the others into the meeting room, everyone who was sitting stood up in unison and looked at Dongfang Yu and the others with excitement. Ancestor. At this time, a middle-aged man excitedly threw himself into Uncle Lien's arms and began to cry. Seeing this scene, Uncle Lien was stunned at first. Then, he suddenly reacted and couldn't help but say, You are Lien Zhe. It's me. Old ancestor. The middle-aged man named Lien Zhe raised his head and looked at his ancestor with some embarrassment. You've already grown so big. Uncle Lien sighed endlessly. He never thought that he would see this little fellow again. After Lien Zhe took the lead, those people who had been waiting for a long time with excited faces also pounced towards their own ancestors. Dongfang Yu's heart was filled with excitement when he saw them acknowledge each other. However, he didn't have any descendants, so he could only watch others being intimate with each other. Big brother, you still have me. Dongfang Lin walked to his brother's side and said softly. His face even revealed a look of adoration, which made Dongfang Yu's heart soften. Yup. I still have a younger brother. Dongfang Yu said with a smile. Then, Dongfang Yu and Dongfang Lin left the meeting room to the excited crowd. They left quietly because they had a lot to say to each other. In Dongfang Lin's room, Dongfang Yu told him about Leng Ruoxue. After hearing this, Dongfang Lin's eyes widened in disbelief. Before this, he thought that his big brother and the others had found a way to escape by themselves, so he didn't ask much. However, he didn't expect that his big brother and the others were actually saved by someone, and by Master Ye's disciple at that. However, he had also heard from his big brother that Leng Ruoxue was the disciple of Master Yu. It was no wonder that they did not know of her existence. Wait a minute. Leng Ruoxue. Why did he feel that this name was a little familiar? Dongfang Lin couldn't recall where he had heard this name before, but he was definitely no stranger to it. Thinking of this, he couldn't help but ask curiously, "Big brother, since Master Ye's disciple has been found, why are you still frowning?" He noticed that when Big Brother mentioned Leng Ruoxue, his expression was unusually conflicted. Could it be that Leng Ruoxue had given Big Brother a difficult problem? "We were chased out by that girl," Dongfang Yu said gloomily. He didn't want Lin Fan to know about this, but he had no choice but to tell him. "Arg! It can't be, right? Why is that?" When Dongfang Lin heard this, a rare crack appeared on his gentle face. However, he was more curious. "It's a long story," Dongfang Yu sighed. Then, he recounted the entire incident to Dongfang Lin. Who would have thought that Dongfang Lin would burst into wild laughter after listening to him? Dongfang Yu's face was full of black lines when he saw his brother's expression. His younger brother, who had always been calm, had actually lost his composure today, and it was even after listening to his words. "Are you done laughing?" Dongfang Yu's face darkened, but he suppressed his anger. "Ha ha ha. Big brother. I'm sorry, it's not that I want to laugh, but it's just too funny. I didn't expect you guys to be despised by others and chased out like flies. I like that little girl." Dongfang Lin laughed evilly. Even though he had never met Leng Ruoxue before, he had to give her a high score for her character and the fact that she dared to chase away his big brother. "Are you gloating over my misfortune?" Dongfang Yu said, speechless. "Hee hee. Of course not. But big brother, she's still your savior, yet you're acting all high and mighty in front of her. It's really a bit too much. If I were her, I wouldn't treat you well either," Dongfang Lin said. In fact, although his big brother had only described the conversation with him, with his understanding of the people around his big brother, he naturally knew some of their thoughts. Then, Dongfang Lin added, "How can you make Yaoji speak? Other than being jealous, that woman only knows how to ruin things." He didn't like Yaoji.